Chapter 17. First Blood, First Kill. Packing up their belongings and preparing to set off to Roper Lake, Jonathan and Alicia passed out tablets. Alicia said to everyone, "We were thinking and decided to make these tablets for everyone. They can be used for entertainment or personal use. Honestly, for anything. There's a real-time GPS, internet with anti-tracking software embedded into the system, and a 65.5 GHz processor, 25 terabyte hard drive with 16 terabytes of memory. This system is exclusively for us and totally hack-proof." Waninyekova was the only one who didn't know how to operate the device, so Alicia pointed to a few buttons embedded in the screen. "Click on the real-time GPS here, and you'll see us," pointing to the blue dots on the screen as he continued. "Unless someone has a cloaking device, we will see them before they see us." Using his fingers to zoom in and out, he continued. "This is our destination, you see. These patches of red dots here and a massive red patch here." Waninyekova was uncertain about which path to take as he looked at the tablet playing with the buttons and moving the screen. Waninyekova, looking at the red dots. "Either way we go, there sure are a lot of people out here for this place to be called no man's land." Waninyekova studied the device for a minute and zoomed in and out. "These are mountains, I would imagine?" he said, and Alicia replied. "Yes, and these are valleys. You see how they are formed like a U or C. We don't want to get ambushed in one of those." Studying the device, Waninyekova said, "Silver City will take 2 days, so let's just head towards Silver City and see what it looks like tonight when we pitch camp." Heading west, they were in groups of 3s and arranged according to their gift. Alicia, Joy, and Waninyekova were the leading group, followed by Joan, Elijah, and Daniel, while Jonathan, Grace, and Mercy were in the rear. Looking back, Waninyekova said, "You're not able to take down the buildings you guys created?" Alicia said, "No, they have to be destroyed, but no weapons or equipment were left behind. They are just buildings." Waninyekova said, "Oh no, it's not important. I was just curious." They traveled about 5 miles southwest of Kabbalah Lake. Jonathan and Alicia looked at each other, and then at Waninyekova. "Do you remember those red dots back there?" Alicia asked. Waninyekova said, "Yeah?" Jonathan interrupted. "Well, they are still there, but they are heading our way. We have about 25 jet ships coming straight towards us heading northwest." Waninyekova was looking at the tablet. "Are they the same red dots we saw earlier?" Alicia nodded. "We believe so." Waninyekova paused. "Let's hope they are going to El Paso." Jonathan replied. "If they were going to El Paso, their speed would have dropped off miles before they got there. Look." Waninyekova was already looking at the tablet as Jonathan made some adjustments to the tablet, which shows the speed the crafts were traveling. Waninyekova focused on the tablet as the jet ship raced by El Paso. Waninyekova looked around. "There's nowhere to hide. We are in the middle of the desert, and the mountains are..." Waninyekova hesitated. "Let us walk and be prepared for anything, and maybe they will just fly by." Jonathan zoomed in closer. According to the heat signatures, these originated from Oedipus' main outpost. Joan turns to Waninyekova. "I know you don't know much about these parts or my people. As I have mentioned before, this is called no man's land because of the drought of 2014 AD when reservoirs and other above-ground water and groundwater sources became depleted to the point that they never fully recovered. The Colorado River Basin, which they called it then, supplied water to about 40 million people and 4 to 5 million acres of farmland in 7 states. Some no longer exist today. Like what once was called California, parts of Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and parts of Nevada, Utah, and Wyoming. No man after that point dared to travel it because of the drug and other illegal activity in these parts. They're ruthless, and I mean ruthless people. I said all of that to say this. They are coming for us. Somehow they have found us." Looking at the map, he said, "Who else would be here? We were running from him. Have you forgotten?" Waninyekova turns to Alicia and Jonathan. "How long do we have before they get here?" Looking at their tablets, Alicia said, Roughly 25 minutes. Waninyekova said. You all should know by now that Sabaoth is able. I'll let you know something in 15. Waninyekova took a seat on the ground. Just before he closed his eyes, he said, Ibrahim's children, be not afraid, but this is your kill only. Sabaoth has already said that you are his chosen, so no harm shall come to you. If he said it, it will be so. Have confidence in yourself. We will sit back and watch you. I have trained all my life, and I have killed no one in my life until recently, and my first kill was very painful. You'll need to get that first kill out of the way. They all nervously said, Okay. Waninyekova meditated for a few moments and stood up, saying, The men shall pass, and within minutes they will also return. They will land there. Pointing a few yards to the north of them. The big guy with the beard seems to be the leader. They want the girls and Daniels to be their sex slaves. But they want to rape you before they leave here because of their long trip from Jackson, Mississippi. They're bounty hunters, indeed, sent from Oedipus. With a sad look on his face, he looks at Grace. There's only one injury, and it looks bad, sister. Everyone speaks at one time. What? Who? He looked down. Grace, you broke a nail. And everyone laughs. Waninyekova then said. Just fight with confidence. Besides, we are fighting for Sabaoth. That's why I can laugh and joke. Who can be against us when he is with us? Then he turned to Jonathan. Your mouth is clean compared to theirs. Just then, the jet ships passed. Waninyekova turns to Jom and Jonathan, pointing to a large rock. Please sit. The jet ships landed, and the men got off their jet ships. Just as he said it would happen, it happened. An obese guy with a beard with a smile on his face said, Well, 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 boys, look like we have a 2-for-1. A hefty bounty, and we can get some shit off our chest. After all, look at the brand on the horse's hindquarters. Pointing at Daniel. I want the little boy first, and then I'll take. Pointing at Joy. That bitch there. Elijah was furious but nervous at the same time. What kind of man are you to rape boys, and my sister is not a bitch? The big guy pulled out his weapon. Well, I see. I think I'll fuck you first. Bitch. Joy interrupted and said, Elijah, I got this one. I always saw his type on those old classic movies, and I've always wanted to do this. The man turned. Fellows, we got a live one here. Who's after me? He unzipped his pants and pulled out his penis. Joy grabbed his penis, and the man started jerking and trembling and then fell to the ground, screaming in pain. Joy took the man's penis and forced it into his mouth while wiping the blood from her hands on his clothes, looked up, smiled. Next! The men started shooting, but Elisha had his force field up vertically while Grace quickly ran to the back of the gang and killed 4 of the men by decapitating them with her assegai. Then she cut off the hands of those shooting while Elijah and Daniel came in for the kill. Mercy turned into a cougar, killing a man, and quickly transformed into a black mamba, striking those nearby. Once the shooting stopped, Elisha joined in. All 25 men were dead. Once the dust settled, the children of Ibrahim stood there in shock as they looked at the corpses. Waninyekova walked up. Clean yourself off and be of good cheer because it was you or them. No more will we fight separately again. We shall fight as one from this day forward, but that first kill is. Elisha and Daniel started vomiting, and the sisters cried as Elijah stood there staring at the dead bodies. Jonathan grabbed Elijah and Jom helped the rest of them the best he could while Waninyekova searched through the jet ships. Once everyone had calmed down, Waninyekova called Jom and Jonathan. What is this they are carrying? Jonathan looked at the men's bags and said, Remember those tiny vials that I had when I first met you? Scratching his head, he continued, Well, this is 50 kilos of the same stuff worth over 5 million bitcoins just for 1 kilo, and this here is roughly 250 million bitcoins. Whoever this belongs to will surely come looking for it. That's no doubt. Walking away, shaking his head, he repeated, 250 million bitcoins. Standing there thinking, Waninyekova said, Since you and Jom are the only ones who know how to ride these things, Let's place these bodies on top of these jet ships, and Joy, I need you to blow all this up. Jonathan said. No, leave a few for us. Holding up his fingers. Jet ships, that is. Me and Alicia will do what we have to so they can't track them, and we'll bury them for later. We will train you guys and return later because these horses will continue to give us trouble as long as they have these brands on them. One Inyekova said. Okay, do what you have to. They took 15 of the sky crafts and buried them after Jonathan, and Alicia made a few modifications to them before giving Grace the go-ahead. Grace said, Just need you guys to stand back out of my way. Within seconds, she had the jet ships and the bodies piled up as high as she could, then raced toward the rest of the group. Go ahead, Joy. Joy held her hands out and blew up the jet ships with a charge of electricity, and the bodies began to burn. One Inyekova said, Let's be on our way. Dead bodies don't smell too good burning. Let's try to make it as far as we can because I know there had to have been tracking devices on those jet ships. As he continued, Grace, I need you to backtrack every so often and erase our tracks. Grace was busy with something but replied, No problem. One Inyekova said, What's that popping sound? Grace said, I broke a nail after all. Holding her hand up. I'm clipping off the rest of them because fighting and looking good don't match. One Inyekovu and the rest laughed. Jonathan and Alicia monitored the activity around them and noticed nothing was coming in their direction. One Inyekovu asked Joan, Those cube thing we used before, can they be used for all of us and the horses? Joan replied, Yes, but do you know how hard it is to sleep, smelling horses all night long? One Inyekova said, True, but get with Alicia and Jonathan about a ventilation system or something because we still have about 25 miles or so before we get to the mountainous terrain. Joan said, Why not rest here, feed and water the horses, then travel at night, if it's okay with everyone else? We can use the mountains as cover. We can use 2 cubes side by side, one for the horses and one for us. One Inyekovu called everyone and asked them, and everyone agreed. They installed the cubes in the mountains by the time they reached a safe location. They ate but were weary and tired, so they called it a night. One Inyekova was so tired that he was asleep when his head hit the pillow. He looked around, and it appeared as if he was in the distant past when he heard the voice of a lady speaking with power and authority, saying, Except for small pockets of resistance, Sabaoth's church collectively and globally is no longer a ministry, but it is an industry. About 200 people were standing and clapping their hands as she continued. When a ministry becomes an industry, it is treated as a business. And businesses are driven by profits, not profits. By managers, not ministers. When profit becomes the motivating incentive, then corporations replace organizations. Corporations need products to sell, stocks to be purchased, and a successful marketing strategy to be effective. The church as a true corporation redefined by the great deceiver has turned the gospel into a product, the church body into stocks, and evangelism into a method of marketing. The crowd got up again, clapping and cheering as she continued. Ministers and preachers are now public relations managers and corporate strategists, and salespersons. Broadcasts and telecasts are commercial advertising venues complete with entertainers and performers who have replaced dedicated artists and music and worship ministries. They booked ministers as motivational speakers not commissioned by God or received by pastors to preach the gospel and evangelize. Style, charisma, and image management have replaced the anointing of Sabaoth. Prominence and influence have replaced the power of the ancient Virigi. The Holy Church is being held hostage while the harlot church takes her place. She turned and pointed at One Inyekovu. Cush, please come forward. One Inyekova looks around and points to himself. Yes, please come forward, she said. One Inyekova stands and slowly walks toward her, looking around for everything seems strange to him, hearing the lady as she continues. The switch has taken place in plain sight but hidden beneath a stealth strategy of fusion through fiction. It was flawless and seamlessly carried out, while the saints prayed but played. This is Babylon rising. One Inyekovu, trying to remember where he'd seen her before, as she had finished talking, the entire scenery had changed again, and it looked as if they were in today's time. As he walked up, "But Sabaoth has a plan for this man. Everyone, I want you to meet Wanyenyekevu, the great-great-grandfather of Cush." Darkness covered the scene as she stepped down from the pulpit, and the audience disappeared. She smiled. "My name is Akila Malik, and it is an honor to meet you, Wanyenyekevu." He suddenly heard Jonathan. "Wanyenyekevu!" Awakened and confused, he asked. "What is it, Jonathan? What's wrong?" Jonathan grabbed the tablet and pointed to it. "We have 75 to 80 jet ships scouting around the area." Grace was sitting on her air mattress, crying. Wanyenyekevu walked up to her and grabbed her hand. "Why are you crying? We have Sabaoth on our side. It doesn't matter if it's 10,000 men." "Sabaoth is able," Grace said. No, I didn't go back and dust our tracks when we arrived. It's my fault they found us. I was tired." Wanyenyekevu interrupted her. "We all were tired, but it is what it is. Now let's make the best of this. Always remember, we have Sabaoth on our side. We're enlightened, not perfect. Plus, they could have tracked us from their last transmission. Who knows?" Gathering everyone together, they looked at the tablets. "The way they are moving around, they don't know exactly where we're at," said Jonathan. "No, they don't," Elijah said, listening in on their conversations. "They lost our tracks at the foot of the mountains. They have sent 3 sets of 4 scouts in all directions a few miles ahead." Pointing to Wanyenyekevu's tablet. "They are here, and here." He paused. "Hold on." He signaled everyone to be quiet. "The shipment belongs to an Abenian named AQ1. He wants the heads of all responsible for the destruction of his shipment." He paused again. 2 million bitcoins reward. We have another bounty on our heads." Wanyenyekevu said. "All right, me, Jom, and Elijah, let's attack the one closest to us first, Grace. I need you to attack the ones on foot. Start, here the one the farthest from us, and work your way up towards us. Elisha and Daniel shall cover you. Once these are taken care of, Joy, I need you to stand guard here with Mercy and Jonathan. Take your tablets, and destroy the scouts as they return." He thought for a second. "We need some way to communicate," Elisha said. "We do, the tablets, but once we use them, it will reveal our location," Wanyenyekevu said. "That won't work then." "Are they on some kind of communicator themselves?" Elijah said. "Yes." Wanyenyekevu looked up. "Make sure everyone destroys those devices, except one, Grace. You get that one, and the rest must be destroyed." He carefully went over the plans in his head. "Joan, time to get those sniper rifles out." Jonathan left first, invisible, and took out about 5 men, followed by Mercy and Joy, making their way up to the highest peak, taking cover and waiting for the jet ships to return. Wanyenyekevu, Joan, and Elijah spread out, found a comfortable location, and started picking off men left and right, killing about 15. Grace ran out for 5 miles and stopped. "Sorry, I need this," she said to one man before she quickly grabbed the communicator. The men were still in shock. She took out her assegai, killing him and 5 more men in less than 5 seconds, taking her tablet out as she located the enemies. There were 2 men to the east of her. She ran and cut them in half, just running past them at a high rate of speed. 10 men were about a mile ahead. The men didn't even know what happened as they lay there dying. Heading toward Daniel and Elisha, she saw them fighting off 7 men. She joined in and helped finish them. Afterward, they headed toward Wanyenyekevu, Joan, and Elijah. "Grace," Wanyenyekevu said, "I need you to destroy all these jet ships." "No problem, and here's that communicator." Then Wanyenyekevu turns to Elijah. "Elijah, make your way up to Joy and the rest just in case they need your help, and here, take the communicator with you. Joan and I will start getting our gear and horses ready to get out of here." Elijah had made his way up the mountain. "Joy!" he shouted. "Over here!" It was Jonathan. "Nothing yet, but these 4. He pointed to the tablet. "Looks as if they might be on their way back." Elijah turned the communicator on and heard a voice over the speaker. 193, this is 199 over. Elijah said. What should I do? Jonathan grabbed the communicator. This is 193, radio silence, you fucking asshole! Pointing to a red dot on the tablet, Jonathan said. That's got to be these guys here because they sped up. They are coming in from this direction, Joy! He shouted. At 3 o'clock. Joy replied. No, it's around 6 o'clock. Jonathan laughed and pointed. No, he said. They are coming in from this direction, 3 o'clock. She smiled. Okay, yeah, I see it. Jonathan quickly asked. How far can you make a direct hit without losing your intensity? Joy said. I don't know, we never measured that. Quickly, Jonathan took out his tablet again and started doing some calculations. Roughly 5 to 10 miles. Let's be on the safe side and say 7. Jonathan paused as he thought. No, let's be on the even safer side and say 6 miles. Plus, remind me we need to work on creating electromagnetic pulses or EMPs. Elijah shouted. Jonathan! They all are going this way. Grace had just arrived, saying, Mercy, Daniel returns to the cubes and helps Wanyan-Yekavu and Jom get our stuff packed up, so we can get out of here. I will stay and help. Elisha, seeing Grace, shouted, I got an idea! Looking at Jonathan. Follow me. Grace is speed, Joy is a supercharged or electrical current, and I'm a force field. Jonathan smiled. I'm way ahead of you. He turns to Grace. Grace, run in place, and every second, touch Joy, just barely touch her. Then Jonathan turns to Joy. Joy, count in your head every time Grace touches you and then send a bolt of lightning toward Elijah, and I'll tell Elisha where to point or reflect the current. Grace slowly started running in place and barely tapped Joy on the shoulder every second. They took a minute before they were in sync. Joy said, Okay, I got it. When do you want me to send Elisha a shock? Jonathan said, Elisha, you ready? Yeah, he replied. Jonathan looked at Joy. Go. Jonathan looked at Elisha. Test went out. We're trying to shoot everything within a 6-mile radius. On my mark. Elisha shouted. There's no time. He shouted. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Elisha started shooting down jet ships with the 3 electrical blasts like a cannon, with Jonathan acting as the target man. One by one, and then in less than a second, 4 were behind him. He turned and fashioned his force field to simultaneously destroy all 4 jet ships. Then 2 jet ships started shooting at Jonathan. He turned and destroyed those 2 and shouted to Mercy, Get down! And destroyed the last 2. They shouted for joy and rushed down the mountainside as quickly as possible. There, Wanyan-Yekavu and the rest waited for them patiently with the horses. Let's go! Let's go! They raced as fast as they could for hours, periodically checking the tablets, and then slowed down before realizing that no one had eaten all day. Wanyan-Yekavu stops at a nearby lake. Wanyan-Yekavu said proudly, You 4 make one hell of a team. And for now, you 4 will always remain a team. Smiling at Daniel, Wanyan-Yekavu continued, We all better get something to eat and regain our strength. Daniel didn't smile back like he usually did, which concerned him. They grouped in teams and went to find food. Some went fishing, some went hunting, while others looked for berries and beans. Wanyan-Yekavu made sure he went with Daniel. They walked along the river. Wanyan-Yekavu started making idle conversation, but no response from Daniel. Rabbit would be good right about now, wouldn't it? Still, no response as they walked. Daniel started throwing stars at an old highway sign that read, Hanover, New Mexico, Highway 152. 2 miles. Wanyan-Yekavu asked Daniel, What is troubling you, my little friend? Daniel, with a sad look, said, That's it, little, I haven't used my gift. But one time, and that was discovering that I had it. I want to use my gift as well as the rest. Wanyan-Yekavu said, Did you know that the human body is like a machine consisting of many parts and systems that work together as one to carry out our bodily functions? From head to toe, The human body can be divided into sections like your head, neck, and stomach. 2 arms and 2 legs, and these parts can be further divided. As he tickled Daniel's stomach, but no response. 2 arms and 2 legs, and these parts can be further divided. Grabbing Daniel by the hand and pointing to parts he named. Upper arm, touching him on the forearm with his finger. Forearm, elbow, foot, knee, and shoulder. Daniel had a puzzled look on his face, but Wanyanyekevu continued. Did you know our brain works like a computer? It sits inside a skull, protecting it from injury. The brain signals our body to read, write, run, and feel hot or cold. Our lungs are one of the largest organs in our body. We have 2 lungs in our bodies. They're close together because they work together. The lung on the left side is smaller than the one on the right side because it allows our heart to fit right in the middle. We use our lungs for breathing in and out. He took a big breath and blew out. Lungs supply our body with oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. Daniel stopped and looked at Wanyanyekevu with a funny look but with a smile. Wanyanyekevu kept on talking. We have 2 kidneys also in our body. The kidneys clean our blood. They get rid of waste products carried in the blood. They check out the minerals, vitamins, and other nutrients we get from our food. He stopped again and paused, looking at Daniel. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Daniel said. No. Wanyanyekevu laughed. We are a body, all of us. We work together like a machine. Sabaoth has put us together for a reason, so we have to think together as one. Your gift will be needed when one of us gets hurt or sick. When we get where we are going, I'm sure you will use your gift more than you want to. Plus, your gift brings people closer to Sabaoth. This is the 2nd time I've tried to help you understand this. You see us do our job, we will see you do yours. Patience, little man, patience. Making sure his point came across, Wanyanyekevu continued. You little old Daniel, you are like our heart. It's one of the most important organs of our body. Our heart beats in our chest. The heart pumps blood and sends it throughout our whole body. Our heartbeat gets faster when we run and even faster when we are in love. Daniel laughed. You'll see that one when you meet your wife. Daniel blushed, jokingly. Wanyanyekevu said, I haven't even mentioned our bones and organs. Daniel looked at Wanyanyekevu and said, I get it. Wanyanyekevu jokingly. Nope, no, you don't. You've got your digestive system. That's the mouth, food pipe, stomach, liver, small intestine, and large intestine. Our digestive organs break down the food to provide our body with energy and raw materials. Daniel laughing. Okay. But he continued as he laughed and started tickling Daniel. You've got muscles along with your nervous, respiratory, and excretory systems. Daniel looked at Wanyanyekevu. Ooh. Chapter 18, Obey. Wanyanyekevu thought he heard something and turned around. Then, Daniel's body fell to the ground. Turning again, he saw Daniel with a hole in his forehead, blood gushing out. Then he felt a sharp pain in his left arm. Looking down, he saw blood coming out of his arm. Looking up, he saw a man with a sniper silencer shooting at them. Quickly and with great force, he took out one of his metal stars and threw it, hitting the man in the middle of his skull. He fell dead. He looked down to see his wounds, then looked up. Daniel said, I get it. Wanyanyekevu dropped to one knee. I just saw a vision. There's a man nearby in some bushes. I will throw 1 star in the bush. I need you to throw 4 more stars 6 inches below where I throw, and I'm going to throw 4 more stars because I'm unsure if he's standing or kneeling. Now! Wanyanyekevu shouted as he turned. He threw a star and heard an unfamiliar sound. Then Daniel threw 4 more stars below where he threw, and they heard the sound again. Then Wanyanyekevu threw his 4 and heard a long, silent cry. Go quickly, and get the rest! Wanyanyekevu pulled out the Colt revolver he got from Jom and slowly walked towards the bushes. He saw a man unconscious, lying in his blood, barely breathing. Kicking the gun away from his body, making sure he was out, he placed his foot on one of his wounds and pressed down. It wasn't long before everyone was surrounding the area. Wanyanyekevu signaled that everything was all right. Daniel, Wanyanyekevu said, you're always seconds from finding your request? He looked at Jom as he continued. We need to get information out of this guy, Daniel. I need you to heal him just enough to find out who he is, what he wants, and who sent him. Daniel healed the most severe wounds while Jom and Jonathan tied the man up. Once tied, Wanyanyekevu slapped the man to awaken him. How is it you tracked us? Said Wanyanyekevu. The man looked at his wound and asked, What happened? Wanyanyekevu slapped him again and demanded, How is it you tracked us? Shaking his head and bucking his eyes, he replied, There's a communicator in your possession. It belongs to the Abeni I worked for Alpha, Quebec 1 or AQ1? Wanyanyekevu then asked, How is it we didn't detect you? The man replied, Cloaking device made by the Abenians, holding his wrist up as high as he could get it. Like the one on my wrist. Wanyanyekevu took it off and handed it to Alicia. You guys see what you can do with this, so we don't have anyone else sneaking upon us. The man then asked, How did 5 men, 3 women, and a boy kill over 1,000 well-trained Anakataas? Still seeing Daniel covered in blood in his vision, furious, Wanyanyekevu said, I'll ask the questions here. Taking out his assegai, one last question Wanyanyekevu asked. Where is this Abeni that you work for? The stranger said. I don't know. He gives the orders, and I carrying them out, but there's a bounty on you all's head as well. I was just told to scout the area for survivors because the communicator was still on. We were unsure of what happened. But when I saw you two and thought of the bounty. Wanyanyekevu slapped him again. You killed a boy. Confused, the man said. Is there another one, besides that one? For I have killed no one today, let alone a boy. I was aiming for you. Wanyanyekevu forgot it was a vision, but the fact that he would have killed him made him furious, and he charged at the man with the assegai. Wanyanyekevu, child of Sabaoth, meet Obe, a great warrior of Sabaoth. Wanyanyekevu remembered his vision and Obe's face, dropped the assegai, turned, and walked away, saying, We cannot harm him. Daniel, heal him because he's a man of Sabaoth. Obe, still confused, asks, Who is that man? And that voice called me a child of Sabaoth. Daniel did not say a word. Jonathan walked toward him, saying, Let's see was the voice, I think, and that is Wanyanyekevu of Louisiana, a warrior for Sabaoth. Where the fuck you get that we killed over 1,000 people? Before he could speak, Jonathan asked Obe, And how is it that a believer of Sabaoth, Wakatilian at that, works for an Abeni? Obe said, First, I work for the Anakataas, and they work the Abeni. You will never see an Abenians get their hands dirty. They will always have someone taking care of their dirty work. Second, I have worked for them since I was a child. I don't really know much about Sabaoth or my roots at that. Thinking about his childhood, Obe continued. All I know is when I was a child, a man gave me this book, pulling out an old torn Torah. And I have been reading it since I was a child, not really knowing why. I figured it had something to do with my family, so I kept reading it repeatedly since then. But as far as the Anakataas, it was either eat or die, so I chose to eat. I have always been a good fighter, hunter, and tracker. And they made me a bounty hunter and assassin. He was interrupted by Alicia, who was looking at the cloaking device. The distance on this thing is outrageous, and I believe I can make a closed network communicator for us now. Jonathan looked at Alicia, saying, It'll be easy to use our communicators without anyone monitoring or tracking it but us. Joan looked at Jonathan. You said that last time. Don't you see who found us? Pointing at Obe. They saw Wanyanyekevu walking back towards them before they could finish their conversation. Wanyanyekevu picked up his assegai and asked Obe, Are you with us, or against us because time is short at hand? No one has eaten, and dusk is upon us. I am with you, man of Sabaoth. We are not enemies, but brothers, said Obe as he saw his wounds healing right before his eyes. Jonathan interrupted. You said we killed over 1,000 people. When did this happen? I counted maybe 100. 120 at the most. Obey, puzzled, said, The bubble city of Las Cruces? That explosion alone killed 1,500. Daniel stopped healing Obey and looked at him, and the rest of the children of Ibrahim looked at each other and started to ask questions. We will talk later then, we must go and go now, said Wanyanyekavu. Obey interrupted. Wait. There's a communicator among you, and the signal is strong. Someone will be here, unless we mislead them to go elsewhere. I need it now. Elijah? Wanyanyekavu said. Please help him find that communicator. Obey said. My jet ship is just a few yards. I need to place this on my ship and send it somewhere. Wanyanyekavu said. I will go with you. Wanyanyekavu instructed everyone to prepare a meal with whatever they had and place camp somewhere safe as he left with Obey. Wanyanyekavu and Obey ran to the jet ship. Out of breath, Obey said, I need to set this thing to autopilot to a place miles away from us. Wanyanyekavu said, How far can you send it? Obey started pressing buttons. How about Rio? Rio de Janeiro? Wanyanyekavu said. That's far enough. Obey finished setting the autopilot on the jet ship as it took off, heading south. Heading back to camp, Obey properly introduced himself, and Wanyanyekavu dropped his guard after Obey began telling his story of being a slave since youth for the Anakataas. While listening to Obey tell of his abuse, trials, and tribulations, living a life as a slave until he was trained to kill for them, Wanyanyekavu saw a vision but didn't say a word to Obey, realizing he spoke the truth. 10 men seemed to come out of nowhere behind some bushes and stood in front of Wanyanyekavu and Obey. I'm looking for the man that uses this symbol, said the stranger, taking a star from around his neck on a chain as Wanyanyekavu looked at Obey. Obey said, I know not of this symbol nor who you are looking for. Obey said firmly and boldly to the men, Who are you, and what is it you want? The man said with contempt, You are Obey, a slave assassin from my father. I know of you, but you do not know me. Now tell me of this symbol or die, slave. Wanyanyekavu was now angry over the things the man had just said to Obey because he had already seen the conversation in a vision. But Obey replied, I am nobody's slave, any more. Who is your father, and what is it you want with this man? The man smiled. My name is Nikon, and my father is Oedipus, and I look for the murderer of my youngest brother, Aislinn. Wanyanyekavu recognized the name. May I see the symbol which you ask about? Handing the star to Wanyanyekavu, Nikon said, This bullshit here, do you know it, for my fight is not with you yet? Wanyanyekavu smiled. Your fight is with me, for this is mine, and threw the star into Nikon's skull, killing him. As his body fell to the ground dead, Wanyanyekavu said, Now I have killed 2 evil brothers with 1 star. The rest of Nikon's men attacked Obey and Wanyanyekavu but were defeated, and Wanyanyekavu was amazed at Obey's fighting style, and so was Obey of Wanyanyekavu's. They quickly rushed back to camp as if nothing had happened. By the time they had reached the others, and after Wanyanyekavu had caught his breath, he told them what had happened to them. As they discussed it, Wanyanyekavu said, By the way, can you install some distress button on this cloaking device? Some kind of alarm so we'll know when one of us is in trouble? Elisha replied, I thought about it, but I think it's possible. Looking around, he asked Joan, I see a splendid meal, but where's the camp and the horses? Pointing to 2 small poles that were standing in the lake, he said, You said safe. The camp is underwater, and no heat signatures can be traced under there. Wanyanyekavu smiled. That sounds like a safe place. Obey looked at Elisha. You have a misconception about this heat signature. The trees in these parts are not thick enough. Although the water is a good idea, we may not be deep enough. However, it is a good idea. I will help you understand a lot of things I know as we travel together, but for now, you need to cover it with mud. Wanyanyekavu looked at Grace. Will you do us the honor? Obey looked on in amazement. How? How is that possible? They said. We will tell you later. Everyone settled in the cube, ate, and went in for the night. Wanyanyekavu tells Grace. I know you are tired, but I need you to run about 100 miles south and return, dusting off your tracks. Grace left, and Waninyekova was about to speak when Grace returned in seconds. Done. Waninyekova shook his head. It's been a long and a busy day, at that. We'll sleep in for a little longer and get plenty of rest. We've only have a half-day journey to Silver City. Obey waited until Waninyekova was finished talking and asked, pointing at Grace. You mean to tell me she ran 100 miles and back in a few seconds? Waninyekova said. And dusted our footprints. Sabaoth is able. We shall talk later. For now, we are all tired and must get some rest. Waninyekova walked into the camp, looking at the fish above him with his flashlight, saying to himself, A glass bubble, this is just beautiful. Everyone was sound asleep, and Obey lay there confused as he asked himself, I have been a slave all my life, killing for a people I hate. Killing my own. How am I supposed to live my life now? Who is that voice calling me a great warrior of Sabaoth? Questions filled his head, and for the first time in his life, he felt a tear fall from his eye. Crying himself to sleep, he whispered, Sabaoth, help me! Not aware he had fallen asleep, Obey heard a loud explosion that awoke him, surrounded by carnage. Women cried for help as they reached out to him. Another explosion right in front of him where alien-looking creatures were trying to capture him. Another explosion and another. There was a cloud of smoke ahead of him. A man's figure walked towards him out of the cloud of smoke. The man smiled at him and handed him a book. He reached out for it. It was the same man who had given him the Torah long ago, but it was as it looked today, old and torn, saying, Obey, a great warrior of Sabaoth. Like Joseph and Moses, you had to live amongst your captures to understand them. With great pain comes a glorious reward. Waninyekova and the people you are with is where you belong. Sabaoth has long looked after you to bring you here. This is your family now, and this is your home. Obey woke up and started crying. Seeing everyone around him was still asleep, he whispered, Thank you, Sabaoth. Obey thought about his jet ship waking up Waninyekova. I think it's wise to move on to your destination. I have to think, as if I was hunting, I would have searched and found out it was on autopilot and would have gone to its last location. It's around 2 a.m., you still have 5 to 6 hours of darkness, and we can move until it's light. Waninyekova said. I agree. Waking up everyone, Waninyekova said. It's been a change of plan, and Obey has made me aware that it's best to move on to our destination to Silver City. Let's use the cover of darkness to get as far as possible. So, let's pack up and get out of here as soon as possible. Quickly, everyone packed up everything and was outside. I need a horse, said Obey. Remember my jet ship is in Rio? Jonathan said. Here, use mine. And then he turned and asked Joy, May I ride with you? Smiling, she agreed, saying, You're making this a habit. Jonathan smiled. I know. Joan jokingly, May I? Who are you, my brother? And everyone started laughing. Jonathan embraced, kicked the horse, and started racing towards Silver City, followed by the rest. Right before daybreak, they had slowed down, for they had finally made it to the outskirts of the town. There are plenty of trees we can use as cover located 2 miles south of us, said Alicia. Waninyekova said. That is where we shall go. Heading toward the tree line, Waninyekova observed the tree line, looking for movement of an ambush. Looking up, he sees an object hurtling down from the skies. Impy! Waninyekova shouted. Obey, not knowing what was being said, shouted. It is coming straight down from the sky too fast. We need to back up and fast. Everyone backed up a bit, and it slammed into the ground, sending dirt and debris everywhere. After the dust settled, an enormous door, 50 feet in height, stood in front of them. The door slowly opened, and standing there on their horses, they looked at each other. Waninyekova said, I don't sense any danger. He signaled his horse to go on as he entered the doors, soon followed by the rest. A stranger standing near a table said to them, Welcome. Sabaoth has seen that you were weary and is now giving you rest. Come, relax and dine, for no flesh has ever entered heaven's gate. But you must not pass the tree line, for you would surely die. Sabaoth has made this place just for you." Everyone was in awe and slowly got off their horses. "Please sit and dine, for I know there are many questions among you." There stood a very long table with a feast of their favorite foods. Everyone sat down and enjoyed themselves as they spoke to the man. Daniel, being the youngest, asked the man, "So, who are you?" The man smiled. "The human tongue cannot pronounce my name. But I'm known as Mshika." One Inyekavu and Obe, quickly knowing who he was by name, stopped eating and bowed. "No," Mshika said. "Please rise." Seeing the reactions of one Inyekavu and Obe, Daniel looked at one Inyekavu and asked, "Who is Mshika?" One Inyekavu said, "We never got that far in the Torah. He's the son of Sabaoth who came to earth to see why we were having problems obeying him, so he came down as flesh like us, to see and feel sin. He's our attorney, our redeemer." Daniel asked, "What is sin?" Mshika said to Daniel, "Sin is those things that Sabaoth hates. Like pride, lust, greed, and there are many, many more. Unlike man, everything is sin, but they compare sin by their own definition, not Sabaoth. You'll know them soon, for you will become a great prophet for Sabaoth like in the days of Isaiah, for his spirit dwells within you." He turned to the sisters. "Grace, mercy, and joy, I have named you these names because you are dear to my heart." Then he turned to Joam and Jonathan. "Two brothers that remind me of the two brothers who were my disciples James and John," pointing at Elijah and Elisha. "Also the same Spirit of whom I named you." Tears rolled from his eyes. "You bring me great joy, for you have obeyed the word of Sabaoth, and you'll make a great and mighty force the world cannot stand." He stood up and said, "Behold, Obe, your gift from Sabaoth shall be given, and no man will believe it, and Wandin Yekavu an unwavering spirit, a faithful servant of Sabaoth." He took a seat and continued, "It is an honor to be here. Let us dine together and enjoy one another's company, for it is Sabaoth's will that we do so." Everyone ate and talked. Laughter and joy filled the air. One Inyekavu asked Mshika, "I had a vision the other day and seen this lady a few times, come to think of it. Dressed in ancient clothing, however, she was in a time I know not of. She called herself Akilamelech? Who is she?" He smiled. "Yes, Akilamelech. She's a prophetess, a guide of the blind, and the voice of Sabaoth. She will guide your great-grandson, Cush, to his destiny, as she has done for your ancestor before you. Her words make me smile. Her spirit brings me joy. Truth springs out of her mouth like a well, and she will bring down strongholds with her voice." He paused for a moment. "Listen to her words because she is not of your time. Many things you will not understand, but your grandson will. It is what turns his heart to Sabaoth." Out of nowhere, a lady about 6 feet tall wearing ancient African Native American clothing was speaking. It was as if they were there themselves, sitting in the audience. "The privatization of prisons allows for commercializing the system and shopping it to the highest bidders. Contracts are now given to build prisons to the most lucrative building contractors. What then? The selection of places to build the prisons or to acquire prisons already built and modify them. Of course, the South will be the primary region because more Wakatilians live here, and the chances of keeping the prison incarceration rate high with Wakatilians and minority prisoners are the greatest here. Then they'll go to the urban areas that also boast of having a large minority population rate and high crime areas. Rural areas in the South are now being saved and maintained by revenues generated from prison labor and government loans and subsidies. Slavery is now legally reborn under a different name. But due to the Depression, private prisons are losing revenue because of abandonment by their original investor, backers who are no longer making money off bodies and cells, as they once did and are now getting out of the business. This leaves the operators of these slave centers with a cash flow problem. So, they are suing the states to get more money. This will lead, of course, to even tougher laws regarding the conviction of prisoners and the release of those locked up. What then? You will start seeing more crime dramas and movies designed to condition the mind to accept that we are all potential criminals who have to be ruled over by an elite group who know best, and are more righteous than we, and demands for less leniency even for first-time offenders and children, as we have seen recently, judges sent to prison who sold kids down the river for millions in kickbacks. Daniel didn't fully understand, but listened anyway as Mshika turned to him. "You will understand and agree in due time. Just listen, my son." As she continued, "This is not about justice, not even close to justice. It is about profits to the rich who exploit the lives and labor of their fellow humans, even and especially those who may not be violent criminals but simply made bad choices that hurt themselves more than others. These are the majority of your offenders. Sabaoth will have to intervene here, for humanity is no longer capable. While I'm all for justice, law and order, and peace through respect for others' right to exist, justice doesn't always come in the courtrooms of this land from those who wear uniforms or badges or robes. Sometimes it comes from everyday heroes and ordinary citizens who remember they are their brother's keeper. Sometimes it comes from those who realize that justice and law are not always on the same side. And sometimes injustices happen in the centers of law by the hands of those who are supposed to represent both. The innocent often gets convicted, and the guilty sometimes go free. Proof that money and profit is often the driving force in our criminal justice system is the dozens of cases where innocent people are known or found to be innocent when they are locked up, yet are forced to go through tons of red tape before they are set free. If prosecutors were as anxious to set the innocent free as they are to lock up the guilty, it would be a testament to the system's fairness. But often, the process is more important to defend than the people they invented it to protect. We seem to, in our society, have forgotten that because something is a law doesn't make it right. The trans-African slave trade and slavery was a law. It was either moral, just, or right. Because something is, doesn't mean it should be. Because something is a fact doesn't make it the truth. That is when what we create becomes greater than ourselves. We are setting ourselves up for chaos. The framers of the Constitution said that laws are only to be maintained when they justly represent the will and interests of the people. But the laws are never greater than the will of the people they were created to protect. Nor are the people elected or hired to represent those laws. The voice of the lady faded out. Mshika then said to Wanyinyekavu, "Your descendants heard her voice, and the spirit of Sabaoth healed their souls. Because men became evil during his time, they separated the men from women, and children separated from their parents. Respect died, and many killed each other for no reason. Women were given prizes for leaving their husbands, and soon after, women said they didn't need men. And the child was taken from their father and given over to the state to be raised as rebellious people. But her voice was the one crying in the wilderness." Grace was in tears. Why has Sabaoth allowed such cruelty to happen to his people? They have forsaken him and chased another, like a cheating wife. Mshika said. Only a handful were saved and returned to their first love, but they had to be punished for leaving in the first place, through the fire, for only fire purifies. But be of good cheer, because of their obedience, you were blessed. Silence covered the room, and he finished his meal and said, "Enough for now. Please eat and rest, for you must be on your way tomorrow." They all talked amongst themselves all day, and Obe took a walk, looking past the tree line. Wanyinyekavu saw him and walked up to him. Obe turned and saw Wanyinyekavu smiling. "I would be happy when I walk those golden streets with no more pain, no more sorrow, and no more tears." Wanyinyekavu said. "Yes, just to be so close gives me chills." Obe turned to Wanyinyekavu. "Well, let's make Sabaoth proud of us, and do his will." Wanyinyekavu and Obe returned to the tables and continued talking about their situation and everything they saw that day until they finally fell asleep. They heard a voice. "Rise and prepare to be on your way." It was Mletsi. Obe bowed. Mletsi looked at Obe. "No, my friend, rise and give Sabaoth the honor." Wanyinyekavu looked at Obe. And Obe whispered, "That's the old man that gave me the Torah all those years ago." Mletsi continued, "A week has passed since you left. Those who seek you are long gone and lost to your whereabouts. Prepare to leave and stay at your location for a week, in which time you must perform a holy jeûne and receive your gift." Joy whispered to Jonathan, "We were only here overnight. How has a week passed? Letzi turned and smiled at Joy. Time doesn't exist here. The large doorway opened. Standing by the door as it opened stood Shika, with a big smile. There will be times whereby you shall need my help, and only during Poingdidio will you be able to receive the full power of Sabaoth. Just say, in Shika's name, and I shall defeat your enemies before you. Letzi grabbed Joy and Jonathan by the hands. Sabaoth is pleased to see your love for one another and has blessed it. He turned to Wanyanyekavu. And has given Wanyanyekavu approval to marry you too. Joy blushed, and Jonathan smiled in embarrassment. They all were happy for the two as they walked out of the large doorway. When they all had passed the doorway's entrance, it disappeared. They were in front of the tree line as if they had just come out of the forest. So they turned around, headed into the tree line, and vanished into the woods. Wanyanyekava said, I will marry you too, after a week, after Obei's jeûne. Looking at Obei. You must perform your holy jeûne as well starting tomorrow morning. He raised his voice for everyone to hear. To everyone else, you may jeûne or do as you feel fit. And they all agreed to jeûne together with Obei the next day. Elisha and Jonathan worked on some of their equipment throughout the day while Elijah, Wanyanyekavu, Daniel, and Joam went hunting, and the three sisters discussed the wedding. Obei laid on the ground thinking about what had just happened and drifted off to sleep. For the first time in his life, he felt peace, he felt serenity, and it was a feeling he never wanted to end. Laughter awakened him. The men had returned, and they all were sitting around talking. Sorry to awaken you, Obei, we were just telling stories of our past. Would you like to join in? Said Joam. Obei replied. I don't know anything from my past, but I was born. Pulling up his shirt and revealing his shoulder. With this mark on me. Wanyanyekava looked at the markings and said, That's the Seminoles tribe markings, but I'm not aware of your clan. In Native American history, many would mark their children with their tribe and clan after 1 week along with circumcision if he was a boy. Pulling up his shirt sleeve. This is my tribe and clan. The Seminoles are mostly in Florida, but a few are scattered here and there. I think Oklahoma has a large population and a long history of them as well. I'm familiar with John Horse and the Black Seminoles. They created the largest haven in the South for runaway slaves during the 1800s. They led the largest slave revolt in U.S. history, securing the only emancipation of rebellious slaves before the U.S. Civil War. They formed the largest mass exodus of slaves across the United States and, ultimately, to Mexico. It amazed Obei at what Wanyanyekava was telling him. How do you know all this? Wanyanyekava proudly said. They taught us as a youth, our history and just history period back at home. We know very little about technology but plenty about history. The elders spoke most of our old history in the past, because we didn't read or write, it was lost. So now everything is written because that history has been lost forever, since the European invasion. They talked all day and finally fell asleep, with all security measures intact. Chapter 19. Separating the wheat from the tares. Wanyanyekava woke up everyone at 5 in the morning as they performed jeûne. They sang, meditated, and prayed together as they taught Obei the definitions and katas. They effectually separated and went about their way to jeûne. Fasting for a week, from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m., they came together at 3 p.m. to read the Torah before ending their fast. On the last day, Obei was enlightened as they all gathered together. Obei sat there smiling, as he spoke an unknown language. Everyone looked at Obei, and started praising Sabaoth, and Obei sat there looking at them. What is this? Letzi appeared before them. Obei, all is well, for you all have found favor in Sabaoth's eyes, a mighty warrior of Sabaoth. But you all must leave here right away and travel to Red Rock Canyon, north of Eagle Point, for it is the last place you will find water suitable to drink before you reach your destination. It is only half a day's journey, so you must leave at first light. Letzi disappeared as Jonathan looked at Obei. Yo, dude, do your ass know how to smile, motherfucker? How about a smirk? Ever since we met you, you have this hard-looking look that scares a motherfucker. Damn. You also look like a statue, even when you're happy? Obei tried to smile. How about this? Jonathan shook his head. Now you really look like a cold-blooded killer. We'll work on that. Obey tried to smile again, saddened. Thanks. I never had a reason to smile, until lately. Packing up early the following day, they slowly moved across rough terrain, heading toward Red Rock Canyon. Wanyanyekevu and Daniel riding on horseback leads the group out of the tree line into the desert. Followed by Jonathan and Joy on horseback together with Alicia and Elijah. Behind them were Grace, Mercy, and Joam side by side with Obey in the rear, forming a diamond shape as they slowly traveled along the path that Jonathan and Alicia had mapped out for them. A little past noon, they were just a few miles away. Wanyanyekevu asked. Grace, travel ahead of us and check the lake's perimeter. She returned moments later and reported. There are about 30 to 40 men around the lake as if guarding it. It did not surprise Wanyanyekevu since this was the last water source for miles that someone would protect it. We shall go ahead, but be careful and be on the lookout. Grace, you and Mercy scout the side of the mountain for snipers. Wanyanyekevu then pointed to Jonathan. Jonathan, once we get close enough, I need you to stay invisible until the coast is clear. Mercy transformed into an eagle and flew off and circled the site while Joy zoomed past the area, looking for any signs of danger. They returned, Mercy reported. There are 4 more men on each corner of the lake. Taking out her tablet, she pointed to their locations. Here, 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 and here. Then Joy reported. There are also slaves in these caves, and 10 more men along this ridge. Elijah, listening carefully, said to Wanyanyekevu, They have communicators as well and have just heard them say they have spotted 9 people heading their way, so they see us now. Hold on, said Elijah. They just reported that Abeni B6 is headed to this location as well. Obey looked at Wanyanyekevu. Whatever it is, it's pretty damn important. The Abeni has ranks like anything else. They are sectioned off from A through F. A and B cover the northern section of the planet, which is nothing more than ice, no humans. C and D cover the central section, where we live, and E and F cover the southernmost part of the planet again, nothing but ice, no humans, just Abenians. The lower the number, the higher the power. This is the central section of the planet. C and D, Charlie and Delta Abenian sections since Wanyanyekevu had a confused look on his face, but Obey broke it down for him. Put it like this, Abenian B, or Bravo 6, first of all, doesn't govern this section of the planet, but the northern section, like Iceland or Alaska. And on top of that, the lower the number, the higher the rank or authority. Abenian that are labeled from 1 through 20 are hardly ever seen. Then there are alphabets. A, or Alpha 1 is this Mr. Lavas guy. Wanyanyekevu heard Obey, but his mind was on the camp. I'm sorry, Obey, you can explain later, but I'm trying to figure out why no one is coming towards us, when they know we are here. Obey said. What I was trying to tell you is a polar bear is not supposed to be in this area. If Abeni B6 is here, he's up to no good. His arrival is more important than ours. Wanyanyekevu stopped, raising his eyebrows. Oh. Okay. Sorry about that. I was looking for instant fight. Elijah shouted. We have about 5 minutes until he gets here. Wanyanyekevu paused for a minute. We will wait. They all got off their horses and waited for the Abenian to arrive. He is here, said Elijah. Wanyanyekevu mounted his horse and said, Well, let's go meet him then. Yael appeared before Wanyanyekevu in the middle of their path. No one can see me, but you. You must get a container filled with water and dip the sand or pour the content out of the sand into the water. Remember, plain weapons cannot kill the Abenians, but the power of Sabaoth can. Wipe your weapons with that water from which the sand is dipped, because this is the only way you can defeat them. Before he could say a word, he had disappeared. They finally came upon the camp of men. The men surrounded them, and Wanyanyekevu shouted, Bring all your men out of the caves, and those on the mountains, and see a great fight. I have no quarrel with you, for you are men of Sabaoth, created by Sabaoth, but have been tricked by these Abenian demons. Bring him out so I might kill him. All the men laughed. Chatter was all over the communicators as men rushed out one by one to see this crazy man with a loud voice. The Abenian came out, a 7 foot 2 inches man built like a bodybuilder weighing 350 pounds of pure muscles with a deep but raspy voice. "You must have lost your damn mind, you pitiful Wakatilian trash. I finish with you, will demand death. But I will not give it to you." One Yanyekova's men whispered among themselves, for it was the first time they saw an Abenian in its true form, but one Yanyekova smiled. "I will kill you as soon as I take a drink of water. You don't mind, do you? Because I just travel through the desert, and need something to drink first." Abenian B6 let out a loud laughter. "Sure. I don't want anyone saying, I unfairly killed a tired and thirsty cat tie." One Yanyekovu grabbed his thermos, walked to the lake, dipped it, and filled it full of water. He took the sand from around his neck, and placed a drop of its content into his thermos, and walked back to his horse as he placed the chain back around his neck. Grabbing a rag, he cleaned all his weapons and gave the thermos to the rest of his warriors, and they did the same. Walking toward the Abenian, one Yanyekova said, "Now I feel refreshed and ready to kill you, but first let's set some ground rules." The Abenian creature became angry. "You stupid human, my patience runs thin." One Yanyekova turned to the crowd and shouted out, "You people, follow this beast as if it's a god. But it is truly the opposite, for it is a demon trying to transform Sabaoth's people to live in a life of disorder and sin. Don't be mistaken, for if you are a human being, you are Sabaoth's people. We all are. They divided us, we didn't." Many laughed, but he continued, "I will show you with the power that Sabaoth has blessed us with." Pointing to Jom, "He will show you what this creature truly looks like." Jom stood there for a moment until the people got quiet. Then Jom slowly transformed into a giant beast with 8 arms and 3 legs, no mouth, and a thick rash all over his body. The people became silent with fear and confusion. Abenian B6 shook at the name is Sabaoth, and what Jom was able to do, but held his composure in front of the people. One Yanyekova shouted, "This is what this creature looks like." Obey, who has yet to receive his gift, was surprised. "How in the hell did Jom do that?" Jonathan, still invisible, whispered, "You still kind of slow, huh? Just like I'm invisible." Sabaoth. The Abeni creature rushed one Yanyekovu out of anger, and one Yanyekova took out his cane, hitting the creature in its arms and legs. The beast let out a loud yell. "What is this that you have the power to hurt me? You silly human!" One Yanyekova throws a star at his foreman, and the creature yells again in pain. Smoke rose from his wounds, and they could smell a stink from his injuries. When the moment was right, he pushed a button on his cane, and his samurai appeared. The creature's tentacles reached for one Yanyekovu, but one Yanyekovu cut it off. The beast released another scream, and all the men saw its true identity. One Yanyekovu then shouts, "Iwa!" The creature was met with brute force from the rest of one Yanyekovu's warriors. It falls to his death. There, lying on the floor, was a giant torso with tentacles as arms and legs, and its head was scattered everywhere, having a great stench coming from its limbs. The body smoked, then within seconds, the entire carcass burned, quickly turned into black ash, and blew away in the wind. The people bowed down to one Yanyekovu. "Rise! For we're just a servant of Sabaoth. I told you before, Sabaoth is the one you should serve. Never bow down to anything on earth, but Sabaoth. You may go as you please, for you are free now." But the people refused to go as they stood there in awe. 85 men, and including 16 prostitutes, plus one Yanyekovu and his warriors, made 111. Obey whispered to one Yanyekovu, "How are we going to feed all these people? And we definitely can't walk through the desert with all of them." One Yanyekovu stood there for a minute and asked the people, "What is it you want from me?" Many stood up. "We will follow you wherever you go." One Yanyekovu gathered his men together and asked, "What must I do?" Jom said, "There are too many people. How can we trust them all? Can we? I'm not used to being with such a crowd." Jonathan agreed. "It was supposed to have been just Jom and myself." Now look at us. Damn near a football team. With all these motherfuckers. We will be a nation. One in Yekov agreed. I will speak to them individually and see where their heart lies, but what of the rest? Daniel said quickly. Kill them! Everyone was surprised and looked at Daniel. However, Obey agreed with Daniel. Daniel then said, What, are we going to keep fighting the same people repeatedly? Remember, there is a bounty on our heads. One in Yekov turned to the crowd. I will speak with my people, and we will talk about what to do. Please make camp, find food, and rest for starting tomorrow morning. I will speak to you one-on-one about this matter. One in Yekov and his warriors pitched their camp just a little way off from the rest while they had a meeting. One in Yekov said, I don't know what questions to ask to see if they are loyal or deceivers? Obey interrupted. That's simple. Good is good, and evil is evil. My question is, how are we supposed to manage all these people? One in Yekov said. That's simple, there are 10 of us. Each man will have his own band of men. We were warriors. Now, we are an army. Obed said. Okay, well, the questions should be directed to where their loyalty is and why they want to join us. Where is their family? Why were they here with the Abenian? And what were his or her duties? One in Yekov asked again. What must we do with those who do not pass our test? Everyone looked at Daniel again, and they all said in agreement. Yes, they must die. And, Daniel continued, or else they would run back and tell of our location and come after us, like those dudes that came after you and Obey and even the others you talked about. One in Yekov, knowing he were telling the truth, stood up. It is so? Then he turned to Daniel. Daniel, I will need you to take good notes as I interview each and every one. Daniel looked at One in Yekov, smiled. It is so. And everyone laughed. One in Yekov smiled. It is. One in Yekov turned to Elijah and Jonathan. I need you to gather, manage, and maintain equipment and supplies. Joy, we must implement a security system to keep watch over us at all times. Joam and Obey are to be told of anything if I can't be reached. Scratching his head. Looks like we will be here for a while. Everyone must fast, and we must teach the Torah's words for these people to understand Sabaoth. All must receive their gifts and be enlightened before we leave here. After hours of discussing the situation, they finally called it a night. One in Yekov looked up into the heavens. Let your will be done. Feeling uneasy, Obey walked around the crowd for a bit, and then walked up to the spaceship where the Abenian had arrived. Calling Jonathan. I need your help. Jonathan walked around the ship before they walked in. They started reading through the logs and other information they could find out about Abenian B6. Help me up here, said Obey. Jonathan looked at Obey. Motherfucker, what I look like a crane? No, Hercules. I ain't trying to get your big ass up there. When you are twice my size. Tell you what. Tell me what you want, and you help me get up there. 'Cause you done lost your damn mind. Jonathan pauses and shook his head, mocking Obey. Help me get up here. Obey smiled for the first time, trying not to laugh. Jonathan saw his smile. Go ahead and let it out, I see it. You ugly motherfucker. Obey smiled. Okay. Come on here. Jonathan looked at Obey. Don't rush me. Helping Jonathan up on a small ledge. Jonathan let out a burst. AQ1! Here's that name again. AQ1 and this B6 motherfucker got business together. He understands most of it, but gathered it all and wrapped them up in a large cloth map, and they returned to their campsite, staying up all night reading and studying the information. After everyone had eaten breakfast, they gathered the people together. Obey approached One in Yekov with a very concerned face. What is it, Obey, that has you so stirred up? One in Yekov said. Last night. He smiled and everyone was surprised. Me and Jonathan took off and made our way into the Abenian spaceship and spotted these logs and data sheets and all kinds of information with a map, and we understand most of it, but the rest looks strange. One in Yekov, looking off. Jonathan, Elijah! As they approached him, he pointed to Obey. You guys, see what else you can find out about some of this information. The rest of the warriors organized the crowd, and he interviewed them one by one. The first man was a tall, black, robust man about 6 feet 6 inches tall, built like a train. One Inyekova smiled. You are a gigantic man. The man smiled. Yes, I have worked in mines all my life, digging and piling up dirt, rocks, and boulders, not knowing what we're looking for in this desert here and a few other places as well. One Inyekova asked. What is your name? The man looked down, and there was a tear in his eye. What is wrong? Asked One Inyekovu. Nothing, I'm sorry. No one has asked me my name for a long time. They point and call us you do this, you do that. It's a nice gesture to be called by my name, Negligence. One Inyekova smiled. Negligence, where is your family? And why is it you want to follow me instead of returning to your family? Negligence smiled back. My entire family has been held hostage by the Abenians since I was young because of our size. I have no way of knowing where they are or if they are alive, and I probably wouldn't recognize them if they were standing in front of me. It's been so long. May I ask you a question, sir? Negligence asked. One Inyekova said. Please, my name is One Inyekovu, and sure. Negligence said. One Inyekovu, sir, did you really mean it when you said, we can kill all the Abenians? One Inyekova said with a smile. Yes, you can, with the help of Sabaoth, Negligence said. Please, sir, I want to join your force and destroy them, for what they did to my family and me. One Inyekova used his gift to test the man, and Sabaoth showed him his heart, which was good. It was now 1:45 p.m. before One Inyekovu grew tired and hungry. Grace and Mercy had already prepared something for him, and they headed to the chow hall. As he and Daniel walked past Obey's tent, he heard the men talking. Knocking at the entrance, he asked, Have you come up with an idea about what's in those books and maps? Jonathan and Elisha started talking at once, then Jonathan pointed to Elisha. These are a plan to do genetic manipulation. We are talking about food, plants, animal, and even humans. Jonathan said, Sit down for a few minutes. This is very important. Genetic engineering is when they manually add new DNA to an organism. The goal is to add or subtract one or more new traits not already found in that organism. They have been doing this for centuries, but this is a new improvement and sadistic move. The drugs we used to sell, anyways, alcohol, everything has been tainted with this stuff. If we are reading this right, they are trying to turn all humans into them. Or some kind of monster. All humans, even the Kompyutans, are their primary test subjects. One Inyekova was amazed yet confused as he stood there, saying, Continue to work on this. I have interviewed most men and a few prostitutes, but right now, we are hungry. A man walked into the tent. I overheard you speaking and wanted to speak to you about something. One Inyekova held out his hand, saying, Have a seat, please. As he sat back down, there was something about this man, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Your name? He asked. My name is Yong. Seeing the man had just walked into someone's tent without asking, One Inyekova said, So, Yong, tell me about yourself. What did you do for the Abenians? One Inyekova said, As you can see, I'm not as big as most, but I have always been good with numbers and remembering things. So, I was one of the ones who tag and bag, as they called it. We label and pack what we find, but to my knowledge, I have no idea what they are looking for. The only thing we have ever found were quartz crystals, tin, and a rare lead manganese silicate mineral, called kentrolite, and that's about it. One Inyekova asked, Why are you so nervous? You have not lied to me so far, but you appear to be very nervous compared to the rest. Yong said, I'm just scared. One Inyekova replied, Of what? Yong shaking. You killing me. One Inyekova said, So far, I have no reason to kill you. Yong nervously asks, Why do you have women fighting and riding with you? Women are only used for prostitution these days. One Inyekova had figured it out, and he called Grace. When she arrived, he asked Grace, Are you a prostitute? She had a funny look on her face. No! One Inyekovu pointed to Yong. This is Yong. He thinks that women these days are only good for prostitutes, is that right? Grace said. No, why would you think that way? One Inyekovu saw Yong as he was. He is a she. Take her to your tent and see if you can find some clothes for this poor girl. Hold on, wait a minute. One Inyekovu walked outside and spoke to the rest of the people who needed to be interviewed. May I have your attention? If you were born a woman and have been portraying yourself as a man, please come forward now. He waited for a while. No one came forward. You will not be harmed, because of the fact you are a woman. 3 more women come, and the rest of the men had a look of shock written all over their faces. Then a prostitute tried to come forward. Young lady, not you, we see you are a woman. I'm talking about being a woman, and hiding as a man. Pointing at Yong. What are your real names? Yong said. Yong is a unisex name, my name is Yong. The rest replied as he pointed to them. They have me down as Jamshed, but my name is Amardad, said one woman. They have me as Alton, but I'm Isla, said another, and the last woman said, I'm known as Oak, but I'm Mecca. One Inyekovu said to them, You must return for your interview, but I just wanted you to be you. As the women were walking away, a young man approached, but a man in the crowd forbade him. This man is gay. What should we do to him? One Inyekovu said. I'm nobody's judge. I don't know what to do but see if his heart is true. Everything else is up to Sabaoth. One Inyekovu looked at the man. Are you not happy with who you are, and that's why you want to be someone else? For if you thought you were a woman, you would have come forward earlier, when I asked for the women to come who were dressed as men. The man looked down and said nothing. One Inyekovu looked at Jonathan. Jonathan stood up. I too would have had something smart to say, but I must admit that those days are past me, but as this book says. Jonathan held up the Torah. He without sin cast the first stone. Joan was stalked, and One Inyekovu was proud of Jonathan as he turned to the crowd. Again, may I have your attention? I am not a judge, nor do I want to be one. Sabaoth is the judge here. All sin is sin and neither is greater than the other. I look at the heart to see if it's good or evil. Sabaoth loves and cares for every one of us, and he wants to separate the wheat from the tares. If you're gay, trans, bi, or whatever, I'm not looking at that, just your heart. I live my life according to my experiences in life, and my relationship with Sabaoth is a close and personal one. You can't live my life, and neither can I live yours. Your relationship with Sabaoth is your own. How dare I dictate your relationship with Sabaoth, according to mine? If you are evil and proud of being that way, just come forward and get on the ship, for I am already tried, and no need to see you, for there is no hope for you. You are who you are, selfish and greedy. A man came forward with his head held down while the rest walked up with pride. You! Why do you come forward with your head held down? Look at the rest, they are proud of who they are. There's a difference between being evil and feeling guilty for your actions. Come, let's talk. The man walked toward One Inyekovu, and he touched him. As I thought you are ashamed of what you have done, you're not evil. Go and have a seat with the others over there. Exhausted, One Inyekovu looks at the time that flashes on the wall, 9 a.m., as the last person he interviewed walks out of the tent. He stands and stretches and pops his neck, turning to Daniel. That's the last of them. Looking over the notes Daniel took with his tablets. We are 63 strong. That means every one of us has 6 men to train, plus 3 leftovers. Daniel asks. What are you going to do with the extra 3? One Inyekovu smiles. They will also be trained, but we need people for details like gathering and cooking food and other odds and ends. Even for 73 people, that is a lot, but as long as we are at this lake, there should be plenty of fish, and we can hunt for rabbits or something. One Inyekovu was tired and was talking with a slur as he was yawning. Tell everyone there's a meeting first thing in the morning. Daniel turned to bid One Inyekovu good night, but he was already asleep, so Daniel covered him and went on his way. At 4 a.m., One Inyekovu and his men gathered together and reviewed the notes on the ship, as well as the notes he and Daniel had taken about the group of people. The intel pointed out that they cycle through this area every year, and they had 9 months before a new group came to replace the old ones. Abenian B6 was not scheduled to visit the area, so no one should look for him there. The crucial question was, what are they looking, or digging for? These were some unanswered questions. Were the drugs and alcohol present there genetically modified? How can the Abenians change human DNA, or was it something else they were trying to do? For hours they discussed the matters at great length before they all concluded. Just when they thought they were finished for the day, Waninyekova said, "Before we separate, we need an inventory of everything we have here. How many weapons? What kind of technology? Who knows this technology? How many horses? What kind of food is stored here? How many can fight and or shoot? And we need to eliminate all these drugs and alcohol in the area." But then again, the drugs and alcohol can be placed on the spaceship with them. By 2:30 p.m., the people were restless and nervous, not realizing what was happening, and why it took so long. Waninyekova was the last to exit the tent as the crowd slowly moved toward them. "Sorry to have taken so long, but there was much to discuss and consider." Pausing for a moment, he looked down at his tablet. "I will form 3 groups of people. In the first group, please stand behind Daniel." Daniel raised his hand. "The second behind Grace." Grace raised her hand. "And the last group, please stand behind Obe." Obe raised his hand. Waninyekova, clearing his throat. "Now if I call your name, stand behind Daniel. Willie, Akoko, Akozha, Larry, Haru." 13 women and 50 men moved behind Daniel, and Daniel walked a few yards to make room for the second group. Waninyekova read off the names. "These are the people to stand behind Grace: Darlene, Shandaki, Hanul, Tammy, and Chimaka." A group of 2 women and 3 men who were drug addicts. Waninyekova wasn't sure of because of their behavior or loyalty because drugs were their god. Waninyekova then looked at the rest and said, aloud so everyone could hear as Obe walked toward them, "The remaining people will go behind Obe, and this group must leave us, and I ask those of you who are departing us today to promise me, you will not let anyone know of our whereabouts." And they lied. Lowering his head for a second, he continued, "To you who remain with us, all drugs and alcohol will leave with them. If any one of you would like to go with them, I will not stop you." 3 people from Grace's group, Shandaki, Hanul, Tammy, moved toward the line and joined the crowd, leaving Darlene behind. "Darlene, please join Daniel's group." He looked at Daniel. 64 strong. Waninyekova said as he called out the names as they boarded the ship. "Ho Hans, Megan, Kyungsoon, Azza, Odahingam." The total of men was 38 men and a prostitute. Mercy, Elijah, and Joam stood by with all the drugs and alcohol and handed to them as they boarded the ship. As the ship took off, Waninyekova said to the rest of the people, "Please understand me, for I am not a man of judgment, but a servant of Sabaoth. The men and women who are about to leave are power-hungry people, who cannot or will not change their ways, evil men who have lied to me, for I can discern a man's heart, and they are evil." And the last 3 were too far gone on drugs, genetically engineered for that purpose. I was uncertain for a moment, but they wanted nothing else. Such selfishness will hinder us from seeking Sabaoth's light. I cannot let them, just let them go. Because they are dangerous to us all. For they seek power and rewards from earth and not Sabaoth, but you all will receive power from Sabaoth before you leave this place. I also imagine that you knew them better than I, and how evil they were. He turns to Grace, Joy, Jonathan, and Alicia and shakes his head. The crowd was in awe as they looked at the group. Grace ran in place, and every second she would touch Joy. You could hear the people say, "How can anyone run that fast?" Joy started letting out spares of lighting. Elijah turned to Jonathan, putting up his force field. "Whenever you are ready." Jonathan held up 5 fingers, slowly counting down to 1. On the count of 1, Joy had generated enough energy and shot a bolt of lightning toward Elijah, reflecting the electrical current toward the spaceship, which was now 3 miles away. It could be seen in the distance as a ball of fire. The people bowed down in fear. One Inyekova shouted, "Stand! And fear not, for you too shall receive your power of Sabaoth." A sad one Inyekova said to the crowd, "The last order of the day, we must be divided into groups by physical characteristics, but later, after your gifts are manifested, you will be divided by spiritual characteristics." One Inyekova picked the additional men, making sure that Nariglisser was one of them to train, and the rest took 7 people under their belts. One Inyekova instructed Elisha, Jonathan, and their group to create another training facility and a place to dine and sleep quarters. Each person and their group would alternate operating and maintaining each facility and security around the perimeter. It took 2 weeks to build the desired training facility before training started. Chapter 20. Holy Matrimony. Calling everyone together, one Inyekova said with a proud voice, "We have made progress, and everyone's hard work shall be a reward. Today is Friday and the weekend is yours, so enjoy it because on Monday morning, our journey to seek Sabaoth shall begin. I would hope you rest, but that's up to you." The next evening, as one Inyekova was walking past Daniel's group and heard an argument, "Little man, you are too young to know anything, and why should you be leading us?" One Inyekova stepped into the tent and asked the man, "What is the difference between a man and a fool?" The man was fearful and hesitated. I'm sorry, but this is a kid, and I'm almost 3 times his age." One Inyekova smiled. "What is your name?" The man replied. "I am Helga." Smiling, one Inyekova said, "Then you would be almost twice my age, but you have not answered my question. What is the difference between a man and a fool?" One Inyekova looked at Daniel's group. "Outside, all of you." Gathering the entire camp together, he said, "My youngest warrior is 15 years old, and I have made him a leader of 7 men, much older than he is. My friend Helga here," pointing to the man. "I overheard him say that Daniel is too young to know anything and why should he be leading them. So I asked him what is the difference between a man and a fool. Now I will show him. Gather around, for Daniel will fight every one of them at once, and he who stands will lead this group. By the way, there are no rules." Elijah and the rest of the family rushed to one Inyekova, and before they could say a word, one Inyekova said, "Everything will be all right. Many will respect him after this, and it must be done. Trust in him, for Sabaoth is with us all, even our new friends." One Inyekova looked across the crowd and pointed to 2 large guys. You please join in." Obey called out the names of the men from Daniel's group as they came forward. They gathered on one side of the arena, and then call out the names of the men one Inyekova picked. Awatwi and Ephua. Obey then calls out Daniel. "Daniel." Daniel walked out with confidence. Obey shouted, "Fight." Daniel was humble, but he was also swift because of his age, and the first thing he did was take a bow with respect. Then he noticed Dorothea coming at him like a bull. Calculating his speed and force, Daniel kicked his right foot, forcing it to break. The deformed leg stood there long enough for Daniel to step on it, forcing the bone upward. Dorothea let out a painful yell as Daniel kicked Ephua, who was quickly approaching behind him. Then Daniel took out his cane and knocked Dorothea and Ephua both out. Surrounded by the rest, he grabbed a pair of nunchucks. Elijah looked at Elisha, and they shook their heads and shouted, Bruce Lee." Daniel smiled for a second and quickly started performing some techniques with the nunchucks. Helga slowly moved toward him, while Awatwi attempted to grab him. However, Daniel hit Awatwi's hands with the nunchucks. As he drew his hands back in pain, Daniel roundhouse kicked him in the right ear, and he fell to the ground, knocked out cold. He did a double backflip each time, striking Helga. As Helga fell, so did the nunchucks as Daniel faced Helga. Helga surrendered. "I give up." Helga continued, "I'm sorry for misjudging you, for you are a great warrior, and I would be honored to be taught by you." One Inyekova was proud of Daniel, and Daniel saw it in his eyes. One Inyekova turned to Helga. "A wise man can learn from anyone and anything. A fool thinks he knows everything. Always stay humble." He then turned to Daniel. Heal your men, and go back with the respect of your men. Daniel healed the men, and they all left in peace. Wanyanyekava went to his tent and wrote, When a fool becomes a man. So, they say, I'm wild kinda on the loose side. Because I'm rude, and to the point. Changing my ways, slowly but surely. It's a time factor we have in mind. That's slowly coming in place, yeah, and even time. My life comes close to many, but only a few catches life's clues. Handed down from generation to generation, it's a mind game. To those who never reach the position, it's a sad game. To those who have never seen the oppression or depression, they can say anything. When you've been through the fire, you see life as it really is, according to the eyes of the man. So you change it the best way you can. With peace and harmony. It sounds hard, but it's not. When you are a stranger in a land, you can change things. If you think and use wisdom. This is when a fool becomes a man. Early the following day, which was a Sunday, a loud noise was heard throughout the camp. Wake everyone and join me in the arena within the next 30 minutes for an exceptional day, and a great event is upon us. It was Wanyanyekavu speaking over the intercom system. Our friends and family members will be getting married today in a unique ceremony combining African, Native American, and European cultures. We invite all to come to see these two finally get married. Joan, Wanyanyekavu, and Joy's entire family stayed up all night making the area look like a place of peace and serenity instead of a training facility. Elisha had 3 tablets and 3 3D printers going all night making artificial white and red roses and hung them all over the arena. Wanyanyekavu had put up tribal statues and different ornaments representing peace and love. White, pink, and purple silk-like cloth draped over the seats and along the pathway leading to the altar. Grace and Mercy put the finishing touches on the traditional wedding attire for both Jonathan and Joy. Neither Jonathan nor Joy knew what they were doing, and because of what had been going on, they had already told themselves that they would wait to ask Wanyanyekavu to marry them after training. Jonathan and Joy stood there in tears as they were dragged out of their tents. Everyone was in attendance, and even Obed was there with a big smile. The ceremony began with some soft music from classic jazz and R&B artists. Then Joy and Jonathan stood next to a bowl of water as they washed their hands. Wanyanyekavu said, Water is used as a symbol of purification and cleansing. The bride and groom have a ceremonial washing of hands to wash away past evils and memories of past loves. Then they played music with a combination of drums, rattles, flutes, and whistles, followed by an interesting musical presentation by a group of men sitting around a large double-headed drum, singing in unison and drumming with sticks. Joy and Jonathan walked down toward Wanyanyekavu. Wanyanyekavu smiled at Joy and Jonathan as he took out his tablet and began reading, Dearly beloved, we are gathered together here in the sign of Sabaoth, and in the face of this company to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Honorable among all men, this is not to be entered into unadvisedly or lightly, but reverently, discreetly, advisedly, and solemnly. Into this holy estate, these two present people come to be joined. If any person can show just cause why they may not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Wanyanyekavu paused and looked around. Wanyanyekavu noticed the silence, as he continued. Marriage is the union of husband and wife in heart, body, and mind. It is intended for their mutual joy and the help and comfort given to one another in prosperity and adversity. But more importantly, it is a means through which a stable and loving environment may be attained. Through marriage, Jonathan and Joy commit together to face their disappointments, embrace their dreams, realize their hopes, and accept each other's failures. Jonathan and Joy will promise one another to aspire to these ideals throughout their lives together through mutual understanding, openness, and sensitivity to each other. We are here today before Sabaoth because marriage is one of his most sacred wishes to witness the joining in the union of Jonathan and Joy. This man and woman celebrate their love and commitment to each other on this occasion. And now, through me, join you together in one of the holiest bonds. Who gives this woman in marriage to this man? Elijah and his brothers and sisters said, We do. Wanyanyekavu then said, This is a beginning and a continuation of their growth as individuals. With mutual care, respect, responsibility, and knowledge comes the affirmation of each one's life happiness, growth, and freedom. With respect for individual boundaries comes the freedom to love unconditionally. Within the emotional safety of a loving relationship, the knowledge self-offered one another becomes the fertile soil for continued growth. The potential for full and happy lives comes with care and responsibility towards self and one another. We assure them that our hearts are in tune with theirs by gathering all the wishes of happiness and our fondest hopes for Jonathan and joy from all present here. These moments are meaningful to us all, for what greater feeling is there than to feel that two human souls are united to strengthen each other in all labors, minister to each other in all sorrows, and share in all joys. This relationship stands for love, loyalty, honesty, trust, and most of all friendship. Before they knew love, they were friends, and this seed of friendship was their destiny. Do not think that you can direct the course of love for love. If it finds you worthy, it shall direct you. Marriage is an act of faith, personal commitment, and a moral and physical union between two people. We have described marriage as the best and most important relationship between them. It is the construction of their love and trust in a single growing energy of spiritual life. It is a moral commitment that requires and deserves daily attention. Marriage should be a lifelong consecration of the ideal of loving kindness, backed with the will to make it last. Wanyanyekovu then spoke in his native American tongue and interpreted it, saying, "Now you will feel no rain, for each of you will be a shelter for the other. Now you will feel no cold, for each of you will be warmth to the other. Now there will be no loneliness, for each of you will be a companion to the other. Now you are two persons, but there is only one life before you. May beauty surround you both in the journey ahead, and through all the years, may happiness be your companion and your days together be good and long upon the earth. This means that you should treat yourself and each other with respect and often remind yourself of what brought you together. Give the highest priority to the tenderness, gentleness, and kindness that your connection deserves. When frustration, difficulty, and fear assail your relationship, as they threaten all relationships at one time or another, remember to focus on what is right between you, not only the part which seems wrong. In this way, you can ride out the storms, when clouds hide the face of the sun in your lives, remembering that even if you lose sight of it for a moment, the sun is still there. And if each of you takes responsibility for the quality of your life together, abundance and delight will mark it. Do you, Jonathan, take joy to be your wife to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Will you love her, comfort her, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for better or worse, in sadness and in joy? Will you cherish and continually give upon her your heart's deepest devotion? Will you forsake all others, and keep yourself only unto her as long as you both shall live? Jonathan nervously said, "I do and I will." Wanyanyekovu continued, "Do you joy take Jonathan to be your husband to live together after God's ordinance in the holy estate of matrimony? Will you love him, comfort him, honor and keep him in sickness and in health for richer or poorer for better or worse in sadness and in joy? Will you cherish and continually give upon him your heart's deepest devotion? Will you forsake all others and keep yourself only unto him as long as you both shall live?" Joy said with tears streaming down her face, "I do and I will." Wanyanyekovu paused. "What token of your love do you offer?" Elijah and Joam stepped up and gave Wanyanyekovu the rings. Looking at Jonathan, he continued, "Would you place the rings in my hand?" Jonathan began to tear up as Wanyanyekovu continued, "We bless these rings as the symbol of this affectionate unity. These two lives are now joined in one unbroken circle. Wherever they go, may they always return to one another. May these two find in each other the love for which all men and women yearn for. May they grow in understanding and compassion. May the home which they establish together be such a place that many seek." Placing the rings on each other's fingers, Wanyanyekovu placed a broom behind them. "As Sabaoth has chosen you both to do his will, from this day forward, Jonathan, you shall be called Aldhib, which means wolf." Tears ran down Jonathan's eyes. As Wanyanyekovu turned them around, he said, Jump this broom as husband and wife. Jonathan and Joy held hands and jumped the broom. One Inyekova said, You are now husband and wife, you may kiss the bride. As they kissed, the entire arena stood up and cheered. They celebrated the whole day with a feast. One Inyekovu, seated at the table and tapping his feet to the music, thought about the moment he first saw Jonathan and their journey until now. A smile came across his face watching the two newlyweds dance and laugh together, and he said to himself, Music is like a woman. He took out his notebook and wrote, Music is like a woman, it'll make you do things that you never thought you'd do. I'm talking to all men, not just a chosen few. Music, it'll make you say things you mean to say. Do things you're supposed to do. It won't let you lie. Believe me, it'll even make you cry. You'll be surprised what you'll do when you listen to music. Now, look into a woman's eyes. Music is like a woman. Find yourself buying things you can't afford, spending money you don't have. But you won't care. 'Cause in your mind, her love is what you long to find. It'll always be there. The beauty of music is worth every penny. Music is a beautiful thing. Sent from up above, it'll make you look for love. It'll make you sing, and women will make you do the same thing too. A woman with music on her mind will stop time. Believe me, eternity will unfold, and love will begin. So, grab hold, and listen 'cause love has no end. So, if that perfect woman is for you, this is what she'll do. No matter how strong you think you are, no matter how much pride is in your eyes, she'll even make you say, I do, and you will surely be surprised. 'Cause she can just look into her eyes. Brothers, music is like a woman. Then he wrote, Only when a man is lonely. Often I've wondered, when does a boy becomes a man? Is it with age? No way. Is it by seeing death? Maybe. Sometimes I would guess. But for some, I have heard them say, only when a man is lonely does a boy becomes a man. First, disrespect is his answer to so many problems. Then trying to cope by using dope, trying to solve them. Thinking his problems are gone, given up on hope. Once the loneliness kicks in, understanding slowly slips in. Followed by knowledge. Not education, but knowledge. Then the final solution, the conclusion, wisdom. Opens the mind, and to your surprise, your limitations are beyond the skies. That's when a boy becomes a man. Try it if you can. Now you know, but do you understand? Are you a boy or are you a man? Only when a man is lonely does he have time to think. So, he corrects himself, he can't correct anyone else. A boy doesn't think, just reacts. That's a known fact. They don't understand their call. Life is no concern, with lust they burn. Life to them is just having fun. Only when a man is lonely does a man become a man. Listen, let me make something perfectly clear. Come closer, let me have your ears. When the word man appears, it speaks to both men and women. For a man comes from a woman. The woman is made by man. Do you understand? Both have to reach the same goals in order to grow. Didn't you know? A thought I got from above. The one and only. A boy becomes a man, he said. Only when a man is lonely. Chapter 21. Self-hatred is a sin. The next day was the beginning of challenging and rigorous training for the new group of warriors that had just joined the newfound family. It was as if the wedding hadn't happened, other than the fact that Jonathan and Joy were smiling at each other throughout the day. The hours, days, and weeks had passed, and before long 3 months. The men and women performed jun, read the Torah, and learned the weaponry and fighting techniques of Wanyinyekavu and the other warriors. Each warrior named their group after animals for competition purposes, and trained their groups just as hard as Wanyinyekavu had taught them. Some, like Obey and Daniel, taught even harder. Daniel named his group the dragons, Obey's group the boars, Joam was the tigers, Jonathan, now called Aldhib, the wolves, Elisha, black mamba; Elijah, apes; Grace, praying mantis; Joy, scorpions; and Mercy were the panthers. The friendly competitions lasted months, and then as a whole, they were taught by one Inyekevu for 3 months how to fight as a team instead of separately, learning the Isai langu, the Assegai, and understanding the meaning of Umkumbi, Impi, and Awa. And, of course, finally, Point de Dio. A total of 9 months had passed, and Sabaoth was pleased with his people's progress. They were 74 strong. One Inyekevu woke up early one Sunday morning around 1 a.m. and stood by the lake thinking about his family in Louisiana and all the things he had been through since he left, when he noticed Negligence approaching him. Negligence was heavy-hearted as he spoke to One Inyekevu. "I have learned so much from you spiritually, but my physical man is confused, and I feel much pain, because I don't know who I am." One Inyekevu smiled. "Have you ever wondered why I picked you to train by my side? You are a man of conviction, a humble man, selfless, and someone with those characteristics, can and will always be a good leader. Now I don't know if I can say anything to comfort you, but I can tell you this: self-esteem, or self-worth, can help that feeling disappear. You need to find out who you are as a person, and love yourself. If you love yourself, nothing else matters, and you will eventually find everything you need in life. Family and ancestry are an important part of life, and you didn't have one. You were born a slave, and lived as one all your life. I can only imagine your pain. Face that pain, deal with that reality, and move on, my friend. For many years, my ancestors were slaves just like you were, but that was back when this country was first formed as the United States." One Inyekevu took a seat on the ground, followed by Negligence as he continued. "Years after slavery, our people went through a phase of taught self-destruction, self-hatred, and low self-esteem, and it nearly destroyed an entire generation of people. They started bleaching their skins, refusing to marry their race, which was heartbreaking, but Sabaoth stepped in and cured the hearts of his people. To be perfectly honest, the people who this country tried to destroy were the same people who led this country into salvation, but that's another story." Negligence size was intimidating, but his heart was as big as he was. Tears falling from his eyes, he looked at One Inyekevu. "I'm ashamed of my past and confused about who I am. I understand I have to forgive myself first, but it's hard." One Inyekevu said. Transatlantic slave trade, or the Mafa, meaning great disaster, in Swahili, the African Holocaust, and some even called it the Holocaust of enslavement. Negligence said. "Excuse me?" One Inyekevu continued. "They robbed many of our people of their ancestry." Pointing to himself and back to Negligence. "Our people?" with a blank look on his face. "Our people?" One Inyekevu said. "Look around us. We have many nationalities that surround us at this location, living in peace. We are united with one common enemy, the Abenians, who are not of this world. But centuries ago, all black people like us were brought to this country in the transatlantic slave trade, and those already here were taken as slaves. All this took place across the Atlantic Ocean for 400 years. African men, women, and children were initially snatched from Senegambia and the Windward Coast. Slave traders later moved their operations to West Central Africa near the Kingdom of the Congo and neighboring Angola. West Africans sold West Africans from the central and western parts of the continent to European slave traders. Then, the Europeans became familiar with the territory and started capturing and selling them, themselves, to the Americas. They took slaves to the Caribbean, South America, especially Brazil, then to North America because the South Atlantic economic system centered on producing crops and making goods and clothing to sell in Europe. This alone increased the numbers of African slaves needed. This was crucial to those Western European countries competing to create overseas empires. They say the Portuguese were the first to engage in the slave trade, but the Arabs, then Portugal, started, and others soon followed suit like the British, the French, the Spanish, the Dutch Empire, and even the United States. Centuries later, millions of enslaved Africans were exported by the Red Sea, through the Swahili ports of the Indian Ocean, along the Trans-Saharan caravan route, and of course, the millions that were transported across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas. Ships departed Europe for African markets with manufactured goods such as cloth, liquor, tobacco, beads, cowrie shells, metal goods, and guns, which were traded for purchased or, should I say, for kidnapped Africans, who were transported across the Atlantic as slaves. The slaves were then sold or traded for raw materials and transported back to Europe. Nariglisser was upset, saying, "Who could be so heartless?" One in Yakovich shook his head. "Even the educational system of the past force-fed us lies for centuries until the invention of the Internet, which allowed our people to dig for the truth. But these heartless people were organized by companies or groups of investors rather than individuals, and shipowners considered the slaves as cargo, not even human beings. Our people were transported to the Americas as quickly and cheaply as possible, arriving in the Americas to be sold to labor in coffee, tobacco, cocoa, sugar, and cotton plantations, gold and silver mines, rice fields, construction industry, cutting timber for ships, in skilled labor, and as domestic servants. The first Africans imported to the English colonies were first classified as indentured servants or apprentices for life. They and their offspring were legally the property of their owners, and children born to slave mothers were slaves. As property, the people were considered labor units sold in markets with other goods and services. The business was so demanding that the Portuguese established these outposts along the African coast, where they purchased slaves from local African leaders. The old history books said that about 12 million to 20 million Africans were said to have been sold in the Americas, but the number purchased by the traders is said to be much higher. Of those numbers, millions were raped, murdered, and died before reaching their destination. Nariglisser stood there listening in awe, as Wanyanyekovu talked, unaware of the time. Wanyanyekovu considered himself an expert in history and enjoyed learning and teaching about it. He continued, "Centuries after slavery ended, many names were given to blacks. The most popular names were Negroes, African Americans, and other not-so-illustrious names like Abid, an Arabic term that means black, that many Middle Eastern immigrants to the United States used. Ace of Spades, African, for those unemployed or so-called lazy blacks. Africoon, a combination of African and coon. Afro, referring to their hairstyle. Americoon, a combination of American and coon. Angus, which was a black breed of beef cattle. Ape. And even apple, which has to do with hanging from a tree. Because thousands upon thousands of our people were lynched, and most of them were business owners and women. Arf, a term for blacks because of their poor swimming abilities. Ashy, because when our skin gets dry, it looks ashy. And Jemima, baboon, banjo lips, and many more. I can go on and on. Many leaders died for the right to be equal in this country, but to no avail. Blacks have fought in every war the Americans had ever fought. Despite that, we were still treated in such a shameful way. Men, women, and children were raped, murdered, and died until the European descendants realized that violence wasn't the way, so they created psychological warfare, which was the icing on the cake. Jim Crow's lighter skin versus darker skin, the women against the men, and the children against the parents almost created genocide amongst our people. On top of that, the school-to-prison pipeline, whereby 70% of those locked up were blacks. The oppression led to negative behavior in that we started manipulating and taking advantage of each other. You had the false black preachers, coin pimps, in the pulpits, who would take advantage of lonely black women, causing many not to believe in Sabaoth. Women started dating every race but their own and firmly refused. Black boys and men began disrespecting their black sisters at an unheard of level, even by today's standards. Many turned to homosexuality, and even murdered one another. Self-hatred almost killed every black person in this country in those days. Self-hatred is like telling Sabaoth he didn't know what he was doing when he created you. Therefore, to me, self-hatred is a sin. Wanyanyekovu noticed the sun rising. Look at the time. Wanyanyekovu laughed. I've talked your ear off, but we need to rest. Nariglisser was not sleepy and wanted him to continue. Never heard of those words like, but I feel so much better. Just listening to you speak about our history, please, you must continue. Wanyan said. They use Wakatilians and Katai now, but I'm always happy to teach, and I'm still learning more about history myself. But maybe, later today, we can talk even more, after I get some rest. Wanyan had slept until 3 p.m. As he walked out of the tent, Negligence and a few Wakatilians were waiting for him to come out to finish his story. One of the women standing there had already prepared a meal for him, and he smiled and bowed to the young lady. I'm just as eager to tell you what I know, as well, thank you. After a few bites, he passed Negligence half of his plate. Have some? Negligence shook his head. No, thanks, I've already eaten. Wanyan offered his plate to a few more men, and they all rejected it, but thanked him. Wanyan took a few more bites and asked, How far are you in the Torah? They all shouted different books. Daniel, Isaiah, Matthew, Proverbs, Wanyan said. Good enough. Taking a drink and sitting on the ground, the men followed. Okay, we stopped at the transatlantic slave trade. They took our identity and culture away from us and fed us lies for centuries. I need to backtrack a bit. It all started right here in the Torah. Let's start after the flood. For instance, Noah and his wife, 3 sons, and their wives were the only people saved. The sons of Noah were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. From these 3 sons of Noah, the entire planet was repopulated. According to history, the ark rested on Mount Ararat, in the land of Armenia, which is located north of what used to be called Iran, east of Turkey, and south of Georgia. Pulling up a map on his tablet with difficulty. Excuse me, I'm still not that good with this, just now learning this technology, since I left home. Pulling up 3 maps of the Earth. He pointed to the first one. This is how the Earth looked at this time. During the age of Noah, it was one massive rock called a Pangea. Armenia was located here. Now up to this point, the entire planet spoke one language. Most of the people dwelled in one location called the Valley of Shinar located here. Men began to build a tower up to heaven. An ancient Jewish historian, Flavius Josephus, said, God also commanded them to send colonies abroad to repopulate the earth. But the people did not obey God. They say Nimrod, the Ethiopian, held the people under his dictatorship. When they were building the tower. That was the same Tower of Babel, of course. God disapproved of its construction because it showed disbelief in his word to go out and replenish the earth. He confused men's language and scattered them to the 4 corners of the earth. Wanyan took a few seconds to think and then said, It only makes sense that those who understood each other left with one another. The sons of Noah were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. As I mentioned before, so men were classified as Shemites, Hamites, and Japhites, and not Caucasoid, Mongoloid, or Negroid. The ancients, including the Greeks and Romans, identified people according to their national or tribal names. They used Visigoths, Vandals, Saxons, Ethiopians, Carthaginians, Jews, Arabs, Persians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Moors, etc. Naming people by races happened later in Europe. Certain Germans and others conceived of themselves as belonging to a Wanyan gestured with his fingers, a superior race. Men like Johann Blumenbach, J.A. Gobineau, and H.S. Chamberlain, who were the first to divide humanity based on skin color, wanted to advance the supremacy of the white race and its culture. Racism caused millions of deaths and thousands of wars. Race classification set up the color line, designed to create hatred, which was more like envy. Anyway, I'm getting kind of off the subject, which is a subject all by itself. Let's just say many people who look like us had to learn our history again because they spoon-fed us lies about who we were for centuries. Taking down the first map and pointing to the second and third maps, Wanyan stated, These 2 maps are really what I want you to pay attention to. This first map is what the planet looked like during the beginning of creation. The Pangea began to break up. Some people have different times when this happened, but through tectonic plate movement, caused by mantle convection, and just as the Pangea was formed through the activity from rift zones, it also generated this supercontinent to separate. I guess that was when the people separated, during the Tower of Babel, and it looked pretty much like this map here, and since the Abenians came now, it pretty much looks like an ice sandwich. By looking at this first map, you'll know where these places are located. Today, some don't exist anymore, and now most humans just live along the equator. Anyways, as I was saying, the parts of the earth inhabited by the children of Shem were parts of the territory of Assyria and Elam, or simply Persia east of the Tigris River, the eastern part of Syria, and parts of the Arabian Peninsula. The second classification of humanity was the Hamites, who controlled the great centers of civilization in ancient times soon after the flood. This civilization included the continent of Africa, the land of Canaan or Israel, and parts of Arabia, Syria, Phoenicia, Turkey, Babylonia, southern Persia or Iran, East Pakistan, and India. And the third classification of humanity was the Japhites, from Japheth, the youngest son of Noah. The offspring of Japheth occupied what was known as the Isles of the Gentiles, the shore territories of the Mediterranean Sea in Europe and parts of Asia Minor, for they migrated northward over the entire continent of Europe and a prominent part of Asia. Japheth's descendants traveled west, north, and northeast of the mountain of Ararat and the Caucasus Mountains. One Yenyekova looked up and noticed that he had attracted an enormous crowd attentively listening as he continued. Gomer was the ancestor of the first Cimmerians and the later Cimbri, including other offshoots of the Celtic family and the Gaels of Ireland, Scotland, and the Hebrides Islands. The second son of Japheth was Magog, the father of the Magagites. Flavius Josephus, remember that name? For he was a great Jewish historian, and he said that the Greeks called these people Scythians. The Scythians included all the wandering tribes who dwelt near the north of the Black and Caspian Seas. The ancients regarded them as tremendously lacking in intelligence and civilization. Japheth's third son, Madai, is the father of the Medes. They were located in the southern part of the Caspian Sea and later united with the Persians to form one race. From Javan, the fourth son of Japheth, came the Ionians and all the Greeks. Tubal, the fifth son of Japheth, is associated with Javan, Meshech, and Tubal, which are nations of the north. The last son of Japheth was Tiras, the father or ancestor of the Thracians. This land, Thrace, was north of Turkey, Asia Minor, and northeast of Greece. Japheth's grandson, Ashkenaz, formed the Germanic race. In Hebrew, the name Ashkenaz means German. The Germanic tribes were nomadic people. They were Lombards, Burgundians, Franks, Saxons, Angles, Jutes, Ostrogoths, Visigoths, Suevis, and Vandals. These 10 Germanic barbarian tribes settled all over Western Europe. All these tribes were the descendants of Japheth. The Europeans did not have any great civilization immediately after the fall of Greece and Rome. During the Middle Ages, the black nations of Africa and Asia had the most remarkable political, economic, educational, and military influence in the world. At this time, Europe existed in a state of darkness for 1,000 years. The earliest civilizations began in North Africa and the Middle East among the black races. One Yenyekova was interrupted by Elijah. We have people about 10 miles away approaching our location on foot, from the south heading this way. One Yenyekova smiled at Neriglisser. We will continue this later, but let me say this, never believe everything that I say, look it up, and always read for yourselves. The truth is out there, and never trust the word of one man, research for yourself. Then he turned to Elijah. Well, this is the nearest place to find water, it only makes sense, but let's see if they are friendly or foes. By the way, as he slowly walked away, and turned to Neriglisser. Your name, Neriglisser, is a Babylonian name. There once was a prince named Neriglisser, also known as Nergal-Sharezer, who was a leading prince in the court long before he seized the throne. He entered Jerusalem with the armies of Nebuchadnezzar, and held the post of Rab-Mag with the occupying armies. I don't know the meaning of Rab-Mag, but I believe it is some kind of high political office. Anyways, Nergal-Sharezer was one of the princes of the king of Babylon, because the Torah said, and he sat in the middle gate of Jerusalem, which served as the center of government for the Babylonians before they destroyed the city. Neriglisser or Nergal-Sharezer released the prophet Jeremiah, from prison and entrusted him into the hands of Gedalia. He married a daughter of Nebuchadnezzar and, for that reason, considered himself a legitimate successor to his throne. Obey and his entire group, alongside Wanyinyekevu, got on their horses and slowly rode up to the strangers as they continued to walk toward them. An old man gestured to his followers to stop as he spoke to Wanyinyekevu. "Evening, my friend. My name is Raphael," pointing to the members of his company. "This is my wife, Letitia, my sons Jamie, Miguel, Fernando, and Alejandro, my daughters, Josefina and Sylvia, and my nephews Jose and Juan. We're—" Wanyinyekevu, already seeing the meeting, quickly shot Juan and Jose without a word. Wanyinyekevu then said to the old man, "Your enemies are now dead. Please tell me what they were planning to do to you and your family." The old man was still in a state of shock. How? How did you know?" Wanyinyekevu smiled. "Let's just say, I saw it ahead of time. Plus, your formation was all wrong. Who puts the elderly up front?" The old man replied. "They were going to sell us as slaves because of a debt owed by my son Jamie. We are from Chihuahua, Mexico, but they forced us to go to Reserva de la Biosfera Llanos, awaiting someone to get us, but they didn't make it, so they forced us to walk when they didn't show up. We have not eaten in 2 days and are very weak." Wanyinyekevu looked at Obey and shook his head. "My friend, take these people back to camp, feed them, and make them as comfortable as possible. The husband and wife can take my horse." One of the men got down off his horse. "No, one of them can take mine." 4 more men stepped down, allowing the rest of Raphael's family to take their horses. Obey rode off as Wanyinyekevu and the men walked back towards camp. Neriglisser and Joan were later seen approaching them with 5 more horses less than 6 miles away. "I'm not the only one with a big heart, I see," said Neriglisser. Smiling, Wanyinyekevu said, "No, you're not. And I just bet you wanted to bring us horses out of the goodness of your heart." Neriglisser laughed. "Yeah. Plus, you're a busy man, and no one is training today. So, I was talking to myself. I said, hey, self? You know what? You figured we could learn some more about our history if we take Wanyinyekevu some horses." Wanyinyekevu laughing. "Good answer." Getting on the horses, the small group headed toward camp, Wanyinyekevu trying to remember where he had left off. "Okay, well. Oh, we come to the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Ethiopians who were black people." Wanyinyekevu stopped for a moment as he looked at the other men. "I'm sorry, if you want to go ahead, it's all right." They shook their heads and listened attentively as well. Well, these men contributed much to the advancement of civilization. Because they studied astrology, they were capable of formulating many principles of astronomy. These black people were so intelligent that they could divide the years into months, weeks, hours, minutes, and seconds. In mathematics, they developed the decimal system. The most famous Babylonian king was Hammurabi. Even the Hebrews adopted his laws and then transmitted them to the Greeks, Romans, and other Europeans. The literature of the Babylonians is fascinating. Long ago, these black people wrote with sharp instruments on clay tablets. Thousands of these tablets have been found, which disclose a popular work known as the Enuma Elish, or the Creation Epic. The story of how the world began derived from the Babylonians. After the dispersal of humanity at the Tower of Babel, the Black Hamites migrated toward the east, south, southwest, and west. These Black Hamites settled in the land of Canaan, later to be called Israel by the Hebrews. The land of Canaan gets its name from the youngest son of Ham, who was Canaan. We may call them Africans because of their blood relationship to the other inhabitants of the African continent. 11 Canaanite tribes were living in the land of Canaan and surrounding it before the Black Israelites possessed it. Arriving at the camp, Wanyinyekevu looked at Neriglisser. "Now, the next time we have time to talk, I want you to tell me something about our history and also tell me something that happens in history outside of the Torah." Giving Neriglisser his tablet. "Take this. I'll get another one from Jonathan or Elisha. Let's say in 2 weeks or so, but right now, I need to do a few things before I see about our friends that just arrived." 3 hours had passed since Wanyan had seen Raphael and his family, and he figured they were well rested and should have eaten by now. Wanyan knocked on the entrance and walked into the tent once greeted. Seeing Raphael and his family, all were asleep except Raphael and his son Jamie, but he could tell it wouldn't be long before they would sleep. Wanyan whispered, "I hope all is well with your family, and has everyone had plenty to eat?" Raphael replied, "All is well, and we thank you for your hospitality." Wanyan smiled. "No problem. I see you, and yours are tired and sleepy. Please take your time and make yourself at home. We will talk in the morning unless you need to report to me any such dangers that we need to be aware of." Raphael said, "I don't know of any." As Wanyan was walking out to bid them farewell and good night, Jamie said, "Wait." Handing Wanyan a piece of paper, Jamie said, "You need to see this place. Because many people dressed like you are sent there by the hundreds, maybe even the thousands, every month on a spaceship. It usually comes in the middle of the night, but there was once when it arrived during daylight. It's a ship like no other. The ship is a metallic gray that would rotate from 0 to 180 degrees back to 0, then quickly rotate to 360 degrees and repeat this sequence. It has multiple holes where you can see through the ship, and it doesn't seem like it's capable of carrying so many. The key code to get past the large shutter doors hidden in the lakes is on that paper." Wanyan looked down at the paper and read the numbers aloud. 020466 DDP. Jamie continued, "There's an invisible walkway south of a red-painted boulder near the lake, northwest of the city of Ciudad Cuauhtémoc, Chihuahua, Mexico. It's heavy guarded by Abenians with about 3 or 4 uplink satellites on the far southeastern roof." Wanyan was curious. "My people?" he said. Jamie said, "Are you not Wakatilians?" Wanyan, with a peculiar look, "Well, yes, I am." "Only thing," Jamie said, "I never heard them speak English. It's another tongue I'm not familiar with." Wanyan put the paper in his pocket. "You too, get some sleep. We will talk in the morning." Chapter 22, Cuauhtémoc. Wanyan called for Jom and Obey to come to his tent, discussing the situation thoroughly. "What can you guys tell me about a city called Cuauhtémoc?" Wanyan asked. Jom, shaking his head, "Not much other than I heard of it." Obey agreed by saying, "Same here, but I heard of a lot of activities down that way as well, but never been there." Wanyan stood there looking at the city's map. "Check around the entire camp and see what people know of this place, and get with me in the morning, during Umkumbi, with the rest of the warriors." Jom and Obey said, "Will do." Wanyan stood there looking at a map, trying to figure out why his people were there, of all places. Early during Umkumbi, his 9 top council, Raphael's son, Jamie, and an additional 8 warriors, Maliha, Abba, Avani, Shana, Tiago, Hannah, Kenji, and Ninothat, whom Jom found out that they had been there at least once. They all sat down to see what they could find out about the city of Cuauhtémoc. Shana said, "As a prostitute, myself, Avani, Abba, and Malia were sent there from time to satisfy the men there. But as far as what goes on in those parts, we do not know. The men never spoke to any of us about their work there. Actually, they never asked us anything. They usually just gave us commands." Nervously and afraid, Avani walked forward and fell to her knees, crying, "I have been selling my body since I was 12 years old, and I..." So overwhelmed she could not speak. Wanyan stood up and approached her, hugged her, took her hands and looked her in the eyes. "My dear sweet sister, know this, Sabaoth is not ashamed of what you were, either should you, for it was not your own free will, but they forced it upon you. He is proud of who you are now. Remember this, the evil one prevents us from moving forward in our lives because of our past. You are the most precious thing in Sabaoth's eyesight, a woman, a deliverer of life. Without women, there cannot be men. Go and live your life without shame and teach others, who have been through the same thing, that they too can live a life with Sabaoth. If you desire to be married, tell that man your past, what Sabaoth rescued you from. If he accepts it, marry that man. if he cannot dust the dust from your shoes and continue, for he too still has problems of his own. He who loves Sabaoth will forgive you as Sabaoth forgave him. Give that man your all, and you'll never be ashamed again. For even Sabaoth says there is no large sin, no small sin. Sin is sin. Wanyanyekevu hugged all the women as they all began to cry and walked out of the tent. Returning to his seat, everyone in the tent was crying. Wanyanyekevu, wiping tears from his eyes. Okay, stop it. You four. Trying to keep his composure. Is there anything you can tell us about this city? Tiago, Hannah, Kenji, and Nuno stood there for a moment, and Nuno came forward. All of us except for Kenji work in the incinerator. I worked in another city, just south of there, for 2 years. One day a friend of mine named Celso accidentally got stuck by some kind of needle. When it was told to the supervisor, he was never seen again. I asked about his whereabouts and was sent here the same day. Wanyanyekevu asked. What was it you were putting in the incinerator? Nuno looked back at the men. Guessing, 'cause I never really seen the inside of the bags. Biohazard waste and dead bodies. Wanyanyekevu started thinking for a bit, then told the men. You three may go. Then he said. And you, Kenji? Kenji approached the council. For years me and my family worked as slaves, my grandparents, my parents, and even my brothers and sisters. I'm the youngest of them all, and I'm the only one living today. At 9 years old, when I started. I'm 30 years old, as of yesterday. Everyone said. Happy belated birthday. Holding back the tears, Kenji continued. Thank you. As a youth, I learned not to ask questions, especially anything about what the Abenians were or was doing. He held his head down and rubbed his fingers across his eyes as he raised his head. Kenji then said in anguish, They murdered my entire family right in front of me because my grandfather refused to work anymore. It wasn't until they sent me here 3 years ago that I started to map out a plan on how I was going to kill Abenians. But that day you killed him, whatever it was, I had said to myself, I would never leave your side. Raphael's son, Jamie, shouted. What? Abenians is dead. He stood there in shock for a moment. Abenians is who we were waiting for. He's the one over the operations in Laguna de Bustillos. A vicious and cold-hearted Abenian that I have ever seen, and you mean to tell me you killed him? Wanyanyekevu pointed at his council. We killed it. Jamie got on his knees. I am forever in your debt, for I am sure me and my family would have been dead today if you hadn't killed him. Wanyanyekevu said. Jamie scratched his head, and Wanyanyekevu said, You will learn what it is in due time. Wanyanyekevu stood up, approached Kenji and Jamie, and hugged them, saying, And that's exactly what you two shall be, but even more, you shall be a friend and a dear friend at that. For you will be with me without being with me, my 007, my equalizers if you will. Wanyanyekevu looked at Kenji and asked, What is your gift with which Sabaoth has blessed you? Kenji said, Self-healing. Wanyanyekevu turned to Jamie. Jamie, we'll have to wait for your gift and enlightenment, but according to these logs and the people, there was supposed to be a shipment of new slaves a few months ago. No one showed up. No sign of another ship, even coming to this location, which makes me feel as if he was doing something behind the rest of their backs. Jamie interrupted. Abenians' operation at Laguna de Bustillos is continuous, whether or not he comes. Because of the heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and marijuana merger that he, Alpha Quebec 1, and Oedipus have together. Wanyanyekevu said. There goes those names again, AQ1 and Oedipus. Why, am I not surprised? Okay then, Wanyanyekevu said. After the surveillance of Cuauhtémoc and until you two get trained. He took a deep breath. As a matter of fact, Obey and myself will train you too. I need to send you both to El Paso. I need to know if they were running a renegade outfit, or were they trying to fulfill some kind of mission. Tell no one and report to no one, but one of us here in this room. Wanyanyekevu then said, Kenji, please continue. Kenji continued. Well, as a child, my job was cleaning up, And in my teenage years I too worked the incinerator, and by 20, I was withdrawing blood from new slaves as they looked for the oldest DNA-mutated strain to learn how to eradicate it. They were looking for ways to erase your race by using biological warfare that would only destroy your people's DNA strain. But there are at least 3 more levels that go down in that place. I do not know what they are doing on those levels. Jamie interrupted. Researching and testing synthetic drugs. Kenji kneels and starts drawing on the floor as he continues. It's built much like a box or rectangle about 30 yards by 130 yards. This is inside the lake called Laguna de Bustillos. You have one small 2-story building here, and there's a communication tower and another tower on the east side that controls the large doors that open up when the ship arrives. The ship rotates at 0 to 180 degrees back to 0, then it does a 360-degree turn, but when it unloads, it sits hovering over the lake, and it does a 260-degree turns, and a light beam empties the bodies. They are alive, you can see them moving, but they are wrapped in some kind of gel. Wanyan stood there listening, then suddenly stared off into space and stood up. Kenji, you, Jamie, and Obe discussed the matter in detail. I have something heavy on my heart. Our training will start first thing in the morning. Wanyan reached for the intercom, and with great pain, shouted, I am my Kumbi. The entire camp came running. He walked outside and stood on top of one of the small buildings, speaking into the microphone. Forgive me. I have forgotten your pain, my fellow warriors, and you are not just warriors, you are my brothers and sisters. If you know that your loved ones are alive or think that they are alive, please go and find them. If you find peace and want to stay, by all means, stay and tell of Sabaoth goodness. But know this, you are all welcome back with open arms. But those that return with you must serve Sabaoth to stay here. Many of the people started talking amongst themselves. Wanyan continued. How many of you would like to go see if your family is still living? 47 had raised their hands. Go now, but I'm afraid you must go afoot because we do not have enough resources for each man to have a horse. But go and find out, and if they return with you, so be it. If they do not and you want to stay, you shall stay, but if you return, please return with seeds, livestock, and things that will help us grow. Go in groups and stay in groups until it's time to part ways. Wanyan jumped off the building and returned to his tent for the rest of the day. Early the following day, after training with Kenji and Jamie, a group of 8 people headed west, followed by a group of 12 headed north. By noon, a party of 13 headed east before the last group prepared to head south. Wanyan stopped them. Aldhib and his wife Joy, along with 7 more, shall accompany you to see about this city of Quadamok. With strict orders, he told Aldhib, Joy, and their crew, stay in the shadows and watch and observe. However, everyone must carry their communication devices, but no communication between you, except in an emergency. Return within a week or 2 with a report. You need at least 1 speedster. Axel raised her hand. Okay, because if one of those spaceships arrives, I want to be there. As they all left, there stood Wanyan with Jom and Negligence. Negligence said, Okay, everyone has at least a week's worth of ration. That leaves us with 45 men and women and about 2 weeks' worth of food for us. But we got the lake filled with fish. Sabaoth is able. Wanyan smiled. Sabaoth is able. Listening to Negligence speak, Wanyan said, hold on, don't you have something for me? Negligence smiled. As a matter of fact, I do. Clearing his throat, Negligence smiled. I first came across, in the Song of Solomon, chapter 1 verse 5, as he opened the Torah. And it says, I am black but lovely, O daughters of Jerusalem, like the tents of Kedar, like the curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I am black, for the sun has burned me. My mother's sons were angry with me, they made me caretaker of the vineyards, but I have not taken care of my own vineyard. So, this is King David and Bathsheba's son. So, when it said my mother's sons were angry with me, I concluded that King David and his ancestors were also black. Smiling, Neriglisser said. You see? He said as he continued. Now turn with me to Jeremiah 8 verse 21. For the hurt of the daughter of my people am I hurt. I am black. Astonishment hath taken hold on me. Neriglisser closed the Torah. Was Jeremiah black as well? I remember reading how the Jews of Arabia were the ones that accompanied the Queen of Sheba and her son back from their visit to Israel. And many of the leaders and inhabitants of Ethiopia became Jewish and seized political domination of ancient Ethiopia, which was called Aksum back then. Many say that this was the religious center that contained the Ark of the Covenant brought from Jerusalem by the offspring of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, Menelik I. Also, according to Acts of the Apostles chapter 8, verses 26 through 40, an Ethiopian eunuch, a servant of Queen Candace of Ethiopia, was baptized soon after the resurrection. You see, in early church records history books, Eusebius, a Roman historian, said that this man returned to Ethiopia, where he spread his faith. The king of Aksum soon embraced Christianity and declared it the state religion. So, Ethiopia was the oldest Christian nation in the world. Meaning that Ethiopia was a Christian country long before Ireland and other parts of Europe. Ethiopia was closer to what Christianity was like before it became entangled with notions derived from the imperial ambitions of Rome. And check this out, Neriglisser said. Wanyanyekava replied. Okay, I'm checking. Neriglisser could not stop smiling and laughing as he got excited talking to Wanyanyekavu. Queen Candace was no joke herself. She was Empress of Ethiopia when King Alexander was on his world-conquering rampage. Queen Candace was world-famous as a military tactician and field commander. They say King Alexander could not entertain even the possibility of having his world fame destroyed by risking defeat, especially by a woman. He stopped his armies right at the borders of Ethiopia and did not invade, because he was met there by the waiting black troops with their queen in command. She arranged her armies strategically to meet him, and was present on a war elephant when he approached. Having assessed the strength of her troops, Alexander withdrew from Nubia and headed to Egypt instead. Another story claims that Alexander and Candace had a romantic encounter. The Romans met several queens of Meroe, whom they thought were named Candake. They did not realize that Candake was simply the Meroitic title meaning queen or mother of the crown prince. The Cushites gave special honor to their queens because they believed that the kings, who were sons of these women, were also sons of the great god, Amun. In other words, they imagined that these ladies were wives of the god and mothers of the living gods or the kings. If a king died, his wife might rule alone while her son was growing up. The people would worship her like a goddess. When the Romans went to war against Cush, they reported that the Cushite army was led by a Candace who was a massive, powerful woman, covered with jewels and elaborate robes and blind in one eye. Neriglisser was silent for a moment, as his mind raced. Check this out. Did you know that when Jerusalem and Judea were left desolate, most people were either killed, held in captivity, or were refugees fleeing in different groups to remote lands as far as South Africa? All that remained in Israel was the defiant little garrison atop the mount at Masada, a fortress complex south of the Dead Sea built by Herod the Great. In the end, the entire Jewish nation was scattered throughout the earth. They called this the Second Exile or Edom Exile. Even the Jewish leaders, an elite, were exiled, killed, or sold into slavery. They tried to make a comeback in 132 CE, under Bar Kokhba, rebelling against Hadrian. But 2 years later, Hadrian's army defeated the Jewish armies, and Jewish independence was lost. As their punishment, Hadrian changed the name of Jerusalem to Aelia Capitolina, turned it into a pagan city, and banned the Jews from living there. Hadrian renamed Judea and Samaria to Syria Palestina. Check this out, Neriglisser said. Wanyanyekava replied. I'm still checking, Neriglisser said. I'm trying to make a connection here. Wanyanyekava replied. Go ahead, I'm listening. Neriglisser rubbed his beard, thinking. There were many, and I mean many, great African nations, but there are at least 10 African kingdoms many don't know about. Well, I didn't know about. One was the Bornu. Pointing to the word, Wanyanyekova said. Bornu Empire. Nariglisser said. Okay, the Bornu Empire grew into the Kanem Empire, in northeastern Nigeria. At its height, it covered not only much of Chad, but also parts of southern Libya and eastern Niger, northeastern Nigeria, and northern Cameroon. By the late 11th century, this same kingdom became known as the Islamic Saifa. Pointing to the word, Wanyanyekova said. Saifawa or Saifawa dynasty. Nariglisser said. Saifawa or Saifawa dynasty, which was founded by Humai or Hammei ibn Salamna. The Saifawa dynasty ruled for 771 years, making it one of the longest-lasting dynasties in human history. Then there was the Saw civilization which flourished in Middle Africa, and the Saw lived by the Shari River south of Lake Chad and territory that later became part of Cameroon and Chad. Saw were skilled workers in bronze, copper, and iron. Then there was the Shilluk Kingdom, the Bagirmi Kingdom, and the Wadai Empire, the Kingdom of Luba or the Luba Empire. In the Kingdom of Lunda and the Ajuran Empire, many of these tribes throughout Africa claimed Jewish ancestry. They observed Semitic traditions such as kosher-like dietary restrictions and slaughter practices, male circumcision, and strict rules against intermarriage. Many Semitic-sounding clan names were in Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Uganda, Cameroon, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and even São Tomé, and other countries, as well. One that caught my eye was an African tribe called the Lemba, in South Africa. Now peep this. Wanyanyekova laughing. I'm peeping. Nariglisser was so engulfed in his words, and Wanyanyekova saw his glow and was excited as Nariglisser continued. We already spoke about this. I just wanted to confirm what you said. Did you know that the end of the slave trade was not the end of slavery? Before Wanyanyekova could answer, Nariglisser continued, but Wanyanyekova was proud of how Nariglisser was reacting and let him continue. Now, Britain has been considered the great liberator of enslaved African people after becoming the first to abolish the slave trade in 1807, and pressuring other countries to follow suit. Truth be told, Britain was the biggest exporter of Africans during the 18th century. For 200 years, Portugal had a monopoly on the export of Africans for enslavement. They estimate that during the 450 years of the transatlantic slave trade, Portugal transported over 4.5 million African captives, about 40% of the total. During the 18th century, however, when the slave trade accounted for transporting 6 million Africans, Britain was the worst transgressor responsible for the enslavement of almost 2.5 million people. Britain would continue the practice of slavery for another 26 years after abolishing the slave trade, which proved too costly thanks to slave rebellions. The United States also abolished the slave trade in 1807, but not slavery. Portugal followed suit in 1869, with its former colony Brazil abolishing it in 1888. The Mideast slave trade consisted of about 18.5 million deaths, and the toll of the Atlantic slave trade at 16 million. That amounts to 34.5 million deaths of one group of people. That does not include the deaths from the practice of slavery across the diaspora, which ended in Brazil around 1888, nor does it account for the centuries of colonialism across the continent. A scholar and historian named Dr. John Henrik Clarke placed the toll of African lives lost during the slave trade or the African Holocaust at about 150 million. Nariglisser repeated himself in anger. 150 million. I said all of that to say this: many slaves that were captured and spread all over the world were from places that the Jewish community moved to after both exiles, and I believe, if not all, most of them were the chosen people of Sabaoth. The 12 tribes of Israel. The original Jews. Wanyanyekova shook his head. Well said. Nariglisser having a funny look on his face, as he flipped through his tablet. I can't find the direct quote and not even sure if he said it or not, but I found articles and some documentaries that said that Adolf Hitler knew black Americans were truly the Jews of Israel. One article has Hitler saying, because the white Jews know the Negroes are the natural children of Israel. And to keep America's secret, the Jews would blackmail America. The Jews would extort America. Their world-dominant plan wouldn't work if the Negroes knew who they were. The white citizens of America will be terrified to know that they've been mistreating and discriminating and lynching the children of Israel all this time. They feared God will destroy them, as He destroyed Egypt, for doing the same thing. So, the Illuminati's elite keeps this a secret at all costs. But I found this in the Torah. Hold on. Placing his tablet between his legs and flipping through the notes, in the back of his Torah. Here it is, the book is The Nazis, World War II by Robert Edwin Herstein, pointing with his finger, as they guided across the tablet, reading. Hitler said, America has stolen the Jews of God. His Jewry. The Negroes. They are the true Hebrews. What a foolish move, and a direct challenge to God. And they plan on moving these false white Jews into the state of Israel. America is desperate in its attempt to win this war using atomic bombs on Japan. America will destroy the entire world in its attempt to conquer it. Now, follow me to the Torah. Turn with me to Revelations 3 verse 9. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan, who says that they are Jews and are not. Neriglisser took a deep breath. I've read about proud moments, sad moments in our history. Reading about people like Dr. Samuel Counts, Granville Taylor Woods, Elizabeth Jennings, Dr. Chancellor Williams, Teresa Burroughs, Simone Biles, the Zoot Suit Riots, Central Park 5, Philip Emeagwali, Arkansas's Elaine Massacre, and the Clinton 12. Wanyanyekova smiled at Neriglisser. What is a king without his kingdom? Just a man. But know this within your flesh, you are royalty, and because you are the child of Sabaoth, the ultimate and supreme king, you possess royalty in the spirit. You are twice blessed. Neriglisser smiled as a tear fell from his eyes. Wanyanyekova said before walking away, You shall be my counselor, to all who have been knocked down, and can't seem to get up. Study all cultures and traditions of men to serve, as a beacon of light to those who seek the light in Sabaoth, but can't see the light within themselves. Just then, as he was speaking, the people that left to find their families started returning. Everyone returned and spoke to Wanyanyekova. When we had no hope, you brought it to us. When we thought there was no such thing as love, you showed it to us. It appears that you might need our help. You have been selfless. Why should we be selfish? We will go and help you as you have helped us. Even with the power of Sabaoth, we are great, but as one, we are greater. Once all is well, we will find our loved ones. You have taught us what sense it makes for a finger, a toe, or even a hand to fight a war and leave the rest of the body behind. We will fight as one body. Who knows, some of our family might be where you are going. Wanyanyekova had tears in his eyes. Sabaoth is. Neriglisser interrupted, seeing he was happy, and said, Sabaoth is able. Wanyanyekova said, Yes, he is, but I was going to say Sabaoth is awesome. Wanyanyekova smiled at Neriglisser. What is a king without his kingdom? Just a man. But know this within your flesh, you are royalty, and because you are the child of Sabaoth, the ultimate and supreme king, you possess royalty in the spirit. You are twice blessed. Neriglisser smiled as a tear fell from his eyes. Wanyanyekova said before walking away, You shall be my counselor, to all who have been knocked down, and can't seem to get up. Study all cultures and traditions of men to serve, as a beacon of light to those who seek the light in Sabaoth, but can't see the light within themselves. Just then, as he was speaking, the people that left to find their families started returning. Everyone returned and spoke to Wanyanyekova. When we had no hope, you brought it to us. When we thought there was no such thing as love, you showed it to us. It appears that you might need our help. You have been selfless. Why should we be selfish? We will go and help you as you have helped us. Even with the power of Sabaoth, we are great, but as one, we are greater. Once all is well, we will find our loved ones. You have taught us what sense it makes for a finger, a toe, or even a hand to fight a war and leave the rest of the body behind. We will fight as one body. Who knows, some of our family might be where you are going. Wanyanyekova had tears in his eyes. Sabaoth is. Neriglisser interrupted, seeing he was happy, and said, Sabaoth is able. Wanyanyekova said, Yes, he is, but I was going to say Sabaoth is awesome. Chapter 23, surveillance. Mighty warriors joined Jonathan, now called Aldhib, and his wife, Joy, handpicked from both of their teams for the mission. Axel, a speedster, and Yom, the young woman whom Wanyanyekova discovered hiding as a man in the camp, volunteered. Yom showed herself as a worthy and trusted warrior, whose gift was telepathy. Amardad was an interpreter. She could speak any language, spoken or written, computer or humanoid. Ifyuza could enlarge himself 100 times his size, and Zubin was the opposite. He would reduce his size to 100 times smaller. One would imagine that Ifyuza would have 100 times his strength, which he did, but Zubin, at his height, had the same power as Ifyuza did at his smaller size, whereas they nicknamed him Hormiga. Then there was Amato. He was a weapon expert before joining Wanyanyekavu. His gift was the ability to emulate any weapon he thought about, whether large or small. Moskim and Awatri were men of great strength, and lastly, Dahlia, a shapeshifter, could transform into any person that she touched or saw. They also had a few warriors with them headed to find family members by their side. Aldhib and Joy's team prepared all night for their long 8.5-day journey to Cuauhtémoc. That morning, they all headed southeast toward the abandoned town of Los Lunas, New Mexico, avoiding all micro-towns, as instructed by Wanyanyekavu. They all were equipped with their Torah, weapons, communication devices, tablet, and what is known as Aldhib and Elisha's survival kit, simply called A&Es. The survival kit consisted of 4 modified cubes for better cloaking and, with increased dimensions, a transparent tent that could conceal your body heat from radar, which was redesigned with Obey's help, and a first aid kit. They arrived at the outskirts of the abandoned town of Los Crusades, New Mexico. Ifyuza and Zubin shared a cube because they tried linking 8 cubes together, and no one got any sleep, because Ifyuza and Zubin snored the entire night. Aldhib jokingly called them the Grizzlies of Madin at Altanwar. Madin at Altanwar was Arabic, a name that Amardad came up with to call their new home, which meant City of Enlightenment. Aldhib and Joy shared a cube and linked 3 cubes, one for the Grizzlies of Madin at Altanwar, another for the rest of the men, another for the women, and one for themselves. But they all gathered food and ate together. After a long day, Aldhib sat at the center of the room, working on his tablet in his cube. He sent the screen's image to the wall. I wish someone would make some up-to-date movies. These films dated back to 1888 and ended somewhere around 2312. There are millions of them, but I think I've seen them all, Joy said. Just put on a comedy. I never get tired of them, plus Hollywood doesn't exist anymore, just this metaverse stuff. He gave her the tablet. Pick something, and I'll watch whatever you watch. She strolled through the tablet, calling out titles. All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Sanford and Son. Aldhib interrupted. Wanyanyekova once told my brother and me about one of the first Wakatilian filmmakers and novelists during the beginning of that era, named Oscar Michaud, who created 44 silent and talking films. Hollywood films marginalized roles and perpetuated stereotypes of blacks, so Michaud started his own movie production company. His first silent film and the first Wakatilian film at that, in this country called The Homesteader, based on one of his novels. During the Jim Crow era, he released another silent film, Within Our Gates, made by a Wakatilian, for Wakatilians and used a Wakatilian cast. His movie, Body and Soul, introduced actor Paul Leroy Robeson, a concert artist, stage and film actor, professional football player, and activist. Joy smiled. Look at you, sounding like Wanyanyekavu. Aldhib blushed and was about to speak when he saw something on the tablet. Hey baby, let's watch that one. I used to watch that all the time with my brother, and the commercials were priceless looking at how they were behind back then, compared to now. You know what, this is my first solo mission. It has always been me and Joan. Joy picked up her communication device. I hate to disappoint you and your brother arrangements. I can go home and call him here. Aldhib said, if you don't put that thing down, I was just stating a fact, not a wish, silly Willy. Bring your ass here, it's me and you against the world now. Bring that ass to me, Joy said. Okay, you sure? Aldhib smile. Me and you, baby, just me and you. Joy smiled back and picked up the tablet. Now I knew there would be something we both like. I always loved comedies too. Aldhib sat down next to Joy as she continued. We used to watch shows like Martin, Baby, I'm Back, and Night Court. Aldhib paused the show. Joy said, What are you doing? Aldhib said, I was letting you finish talking. Joy smiled. I'm finished. Let's watch the show. Aldhib pressed play. As he laid his head on Joy's lap as they both laughed, watching the show being casted on the wall, Aldhib checked the radar for anything usual then and sent that image to the wall next to the screen as they watched classic TV shows and movies. After watching a few shows, Aldhib started rapping alone with one of the show's theme songs. Joy looked at Aldhib, seeing her staring. Okay, what is it? I got something stuck between my teeth again? I don't know why, you just don't tell me stuff. Instead of staring at me, I feel like an exhibit. Joy smiled. No, silly Willy, I heard you sing, and you're pretty good. I want you to sing a song with me. Aldhib laughed. I don't sing, I don't know where you get that from. Joy looked at him. I just heard you. Aldhib smiled. Oh. Baby, that's rapping. Joy smiled. It's singing to me. Will you help me sing my favorite song? Aldhib smiled. Sure. Joy jumped up smiling, and Aldhib loved when Joy got excited about something. She played a classic song entitled Into You by Tamia that featured a rapper by the name of Fabulous.
I think you're truly something special. Just what my dreams are. Dreams are really made of. Let's stay together, boy. There's no one like you around. Oh, baby.
Baby girl.
Aldhib was so impressed with her singing, and that she was singing to him from the heart. He came in rapping. Lies, games, plain insane. That was me, when I was a womanizing little boy back then. Women were just toys and felt that love didn't make no sense. But God opened my eyes, and to my surprise I found you. And tears formed in Joy's eyes as Aldhib opened up to her in the song. They finished the chorus together until the end of the song. They wiped each other's tears, and Aldhib looked at Joy. It is getting late, so I'm going to call it a night. Joy turned to him. I want to watch another episode of Martin, and then I will join you. She laughed at something on the screen. Good night, baby. Aldhib, unnoticed by Joy, got completely nude and walked up to Joy. She looked at him. Aldhib got up on his elbow, looked Joy in the eyes. I love you. She smiled. Why? He said. You make me happy. I've never felt happiness or knew what happiness was, most of my life, and Sabaoth had the nerves to bring me a wife, named Joy. She smiled and laid her head on his chest until they both fell asleep. Meanwhile, back at Mad and at Altenware, Wanyanyekavu, Jamie, and Kenji were training when Obey and Jome approached. We have a band of men about 75 or so on jet ships, and another 75 to 100 on horses about 10 miles behind them approaching us from the east. Wiping the sweat from his brow, Wanyanyekavu told Jome and Obey. You two grab your men, and let's see who we have here, and by the way, grab Grace. Wanyanyekavu and his men exited the south gate, other than by spaceship or jet ship. It was the only entrance into or out of Mad and at Altenware. About halfway to the men on jet ships, Wanyanyekavu said aloud, Oedipus man, I hope he's here so we can finally get rid of him. Having all sharpshooters posted in different locations, Wanyanyekavu and 16 of his men approached them in a diamond-shaped formation. The closer they got to them, the more they spread out into one straight horizontal line formation. Wanyanyekavu stopped about a mile from the men, pulling out a white flag, and spoke to his men by his earpiece. I hope to spare as many as I can, but I doubt it, if I find one man who isn't evil. But there just might be one. Wanyanyekavu bowed his head and prayed, Sabaoth, if all these men are evil, let them feel your wrath. However, if any of these men are not evil, let it be your will that somehow they are spared. Amen. Everyone who heard his voice said, Amen. Wanyanyekova looked up. These jet ships and horses we could use. As a matter of fact, Jom, we need to go get those jet ships your brother buried. Wanyanyekova saw a vision. Sharpshooters, you will pick off those I call out, but I'm just stalling, while waiting for those on horseback to get closer. Wanyanyekova held the white flag high to hide Grace, not knowing if they had scopes, and said to Grace, Make a small dirt tornado and make your way behind the men on horses, and kill the last ones and work your way towards us, quickly and quietly as possible. Then he told his men, Stay within range and shoot to kill. Now, standing about 3 to 4 yards from the men on jet ships, Wanyanyekova said, Good day, my friends. The men held up their weapons, and he could hear Obey shouting, Wanyanyekova, get out of there! Wanyanyekova spoke softly back into his mic. Obey, I've seen everything before it has happened, remember? Then Wanyanyekova started talking to the men. Never mind that, my men are worried about me. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, please lower your weapon. It makes my men kind of nervous, plus, we are just here to talk, right? Given the order to lower their weapons by the leader of the men dropped their jet ships evenly to Wanyanyekova's height, and some men in the rear lowered their weapons as well. Wanyanyekova whispered into the earpiece to his men. All the ones that didn't lower their weapons on my mark, I got 4 of them, to my right, you all need to get them first. The man who appeared to be the leader looked at Wanyanyekova. You are either an imbecile or crazy. Who is in charge here? For this land belongs to Abeni B6 and Oedipus, and I am Tilo, the son and high commander of Oedipus. Wanyanyekova looked at the man. I guess I am the one in charge, and I'm Wanyanyekova, a servant of Sabaoth, and Abeni B6 is dead. We killed it. Tilo smiled. Yes, you're an imbecile. There's no way in hell your silly ass could have killed B6. Now tell your leader to show himself. Wanyanyekova held a finger up. Excuse me. Then whispered into his earpiece. You need to kill the fat one with the white jet ship also, on my mark. Wanyanyekova looked up at the man again. Sorry about that, my men keep telling me you are wicked men, but I said no, all men are good, right? Wanyanyekova counted down in his mind, and then shouted. Now! A bullet went through Tilo's skull, killing him as he fell to the ground. The rest of the men who had their weapons raised also fell to their deaths. As a man in front of Wanyanyekova reached for his weapon, Wanyanyekova quickly took 2 wooden stars out and killed 2 men that were behind him before killing him. There stood 4 men standing there, in awe. Wanyanyekova looked at the men. Sorry about that, those men were a little bit too trigger-happy for me. He spoke into his mic. You will see them raise their weapon, those need to be killed first, and we got the rest. Grabbing the man in front of him, he forced the man around, using him as a shield while he took out his samurai and started killing those whom his men didn't. Covered in blood, the men that were on horseback were upon him. Wanyanyekova held up his hands. Yo! This is not what it seems. As he lowered his arms to sling the blood off his blade. Seeing Grace behind them covered in blood, for she had disarmed all the men and killed the rest. Wanyanyekova was no longer in a joking mood. I know whom you seek, and I know why you seek him, but my question to you is, do you want to die here, or do you choose another place, maybe even another day to rest? Look behind you and see that your men are all gone. And you do not have any weapons. The men looked behind them and saw there were only 20 of them left. Hold on, said one of the men, but Wanyanyekova interrupted him and threw a star that instantly killed him. No, you hold your tongue, and keep your peace, you Wakatilian dog. Speaking the words of the man, before they were spoken. By now, the rest of the men were surrounded and realized that they didn't have any weapons. Wanyanyekova said, Sent this message to your leader Oedipus. Your first son I killed was out of self-defense, and the other 2 as well, and all of the corpses you see here will rot, and soon will be dry bones that the animals will pick off for their meals. Unless you have more children for me to kill, or you, yourself want to die, come do it yourself, if you want me dead. But you, too, shall be a feast for the wild animals. I have seen your drugs and money, and they are all destroyed alongside your partner in crime, Abeni B6, for it, too, is dead. It is now your turn, so that I may continue my work for Sabaoth. But I will give you time to repent and send no more after me, and I will leave you alone. Come at me, one more time, I shall surely kill you and all that is with you according to Sabaoth will. One Yekov pointed at another man. You! I see what you want to do, but I tell you, if you want to live another day, that knife, in your boot will remain there. He continued, we are the best of the best. I would imagine after the other attempts on my life had failed, you would have counted your loss and moved on, but men like you are far too gone even to serve Sabaoth. I know this. He will probably have you all killed for this, returning without my head, and his so-called High Commander is dead also. But maybe he won't. The men all stood there confused, and just turned around. No, no, no! One Inyekova said. These horses and weapons are now mine. You will walk and tell Oedipus and AQ1 that this is no longer their land. No man's land is now Sabaoth's land. 15 men stood there while the rest walked away. One of the men approached. My name is Chamaka, and this is my brother Alborz. We want to stay here with you. One Inyekova checked the men to see where their hearts were and looked at them. Welcome. The rest left headed east toward El Paso, and One Inyekova and his men gathered up the jet ships, horses, weapons, and whatever rations on the dead men and headed back to camp. One Inyekova looked at Obe and Jom as he entered the gate's entrance. There will be a war between Oedipus, and he shall surely die for he is evil. Obe said, that is for certain. One Inyekova got on one of the jet ships. How do you ride this thing? Obe said, training in the morning, after our training with Jamie and Kenji. One Inyekova shook his head. Everyone needs to drive one, so training is for everyone. While I'm thinking about it, again, we need those we left behind that Jonathan, excuse me, Aldhib, hid in the desert. One Inyekova paused for a while and smiled. You know what? Leave the GPS tracking on this one, for I have an idea. Well, you better make that too. Sabaoth just made a way for us to get to Aldhib and the rest of them back here quicker. It took them, 8.5 days to get there. How long will we get to them on one of these? Obed said, about 3.5 to 4 hours, or less. One Inyekova smiled and shook his head. Sabaoth is able. Obed replied, indeed he is. But what is the other one for? One Inyekova smiled. Still working on that idea, either way, Oedipus will come to me. Later that night, after everyone had gone in for the night, One Inyekova laid down and stared up at the stars and wrote. You were black. You were black. Mind, body, and soul. What makes me and my people unique? Who possess a 9 DNA series, unlike the rest, who possess 6. My people have never considered ourselves better than the rest. You said that. It was you who confessed that. However, they seem to ride our backs about these facts. And what makes you you? A person, a human. No different from the rest. Unique in just that fact. But one thing is for certain, we have a long ride home. And we have to do it alone. My people, we have a long ride home. They took the body already, and used it, abuse it, molest it, and then abandon it. That alone works on the mind. Start believing the truth is a lie. And a lie is the truth. Started doing things to prove you are worthy. But the things you do are beneath thee. I'm talking to both you and me. Saying, it's my fault, and maybe I deserve it. That's your mind talking, that feeling of being alone, and it looks to be far gone. But the soul. Oh, that soul has the strength of 10,000 men alone. So come out of the weaker one. It'll be like opening the window of your body. Opening up the window of your mind. And shine on through. Destroying that haunts you. You asked why? Why did I get chosen? To get harassed? Abused, used, molested, and tested. I'll say, Because you were chosen, you were appointed, you were blessed, you were gifted, you were anointed, you were black. Aldhib and his group left Las Cruces, New Mexico, and came to Laguna de Bustillos. They circled the abandoned town to the northernmost region, for Joy thought of her father and didn't want to see the destruction. Once they cleared that area, they established a base of operation. Expecting desert, they were happily surprised. It was green land with rich soil, perfect for farming. Aldhib places 3 cubes in the lakes with booby traps. 2 tents on top of the land. While they strategically placed their underground campsites in a location that would benefit from any attack on the camp. Once everything was in place, they all searched for food. Some went fishing while others went hunting, and the women combined the remains of each rations bag and made a large feast. Sitting there reading a map and eating his meal, Aldhib said to the group, "Even though we are about 5 hours away, I don't want anyone to think we all are together. We will not meet here again until after 7 days, once we get the intel we need. If something happens or there is an emergency, please abandon your posts and meet here." Pointing to the map of an abandoned building in Vista Hermosa as he continued, "If you cannot make it here, use the communication devices, and we will do what we have to do accordingly." He studied the map and paused for a second. "Now, according to Jamie, Highway 5 from Colonia Alvaro Obregon to Cuauhtémoc has heavy traffic, 24-hour transportation to and from Colonia Anahuac, where they change shift." Pointing at Axel, "Your speed causes dust trails, so you will only work at night. In the morning, just sit tight as the rest of us do our thing. During the day, you will rest here and hold the fort down. Observe and monitor Highway 5 and the lake. Myself, Joy, and Amardad will check out this Colonia Anahuac. Ifyuza, you and Yon, start at Colonia Alvaro Obregon and work your way to Pizzeria La Sierra. Zubin, you and Dahlia start at Cuauhtémoc and work your way up to Pizzeria La Sierra." Taking another bite of his food, once you all reach Pizzeria La Sierra, head back to camp. Zubin, you and Dahlia should leave at about 3 a.m., enough time to reach the town by morning. And Ifyuza, you and Young leave around 5 a.m. They finished discussing their plans and quickly laid down for the night. The next morning, while heading to Colonia Anahuac, Aldhib was in a good mood and had an idea, and said with a smile, "Okay, look, y'all gonna be my hoes, and I'll be y'all pimp." Joy surprisingly said, "I don't know how to act like no prostitute." Amardad said, "It's easy. You have to switch really hard." Joy, with a puzzled look, "Switch?" Amardad smiled. "You know, move your hips." Aldhib looked at Amardad. "Go ahead and show her." Amardad walked ahead of them a few feet, switched her hips, turned around, and headed back toward them. "Like this," Joy said. "Oh, I can do that." She walked up, barely moving her hips, and said, "Like this?" Aldhib burst out laughing. "Hell to the nah! You're not making a penny like that, and I see you got that disease they were talking about the other day." Joy, with a strange look, "What disease?" Aldhib said, "No ass at all." Aldhib and Amardad started laughing even harder. Joy got mad, and Aldhib grabbed her. "I'm just playing around, baby. You got all the little ass I need, enough to grip and dip." Amardad was blushing, while Joy slowly put a smile on her face. Then Aldhib jokingly said, "Ha ha hell, y'all bitches better have my money," and started running away from Joy, as she chased him. Zubin and Dahlia reached Cuauhtémoc around 8:30 a.m. and saw one bus driver headed to the back of a building. Dahlia turned to Zubin. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Zubin said. "No, what are you thinking?" Dahlia said. "We take his bus and run his route while we listen in on people's conversations." Zubin said. "What about him? He might alert someone." Dahlia replied. "We lock him up, tie him up, whatever. We'll figure that out later." They rushed to the back of the building, where he was urinating, and Zubin pinned him against the wall as the urine sprayed all over his shoes. The man said, "Hey!" Zubin and Dahlia interrogated the man for 5 minutes. Zubin told the old man, "Sorry, but I can't take any chances. Knocking the old man out, he tied his hands and feet with wires and rags he found scattered around the area. Dahlia shapeshifted into the bus driver and Zubin shrank himself down and jumped into one of her pockets. Loading all their weapons into bags, they loaded the bus. People were upset and fussing over being late. Dahlia started the bus and did as the bus driver instructed her to pick up and drop off as they headed to Pizzeria La Sierra. At the same time, Zubin walked amongst the people, as small as he could, learning what he could. Arriving at Colonia Alvaro Obregon around 7:45 a.m., Efusa and Yong, already covered in dust and sand, added just a bit more to appear homeless and handicapped. Efusa makes one of his feet much larger than the other, and Yong puts on some broken shades she found earlier to appear blind. Walking up to busy intersections and asking for money, while Yong read people's minds. Efusa wrote notes as Yong gave them to him. At 4:30 p.m., all four warriors met secretly at Pizzeria La Sierra on a dead-end road off Compo 15, discussing their findings and realizing that the ship's arrival was that night. They determined that it was time to return to camp. Still an hour and a half to camp, they all were weary, hungry, and tired. When they heard space cruisers coming in their direction, they all hid as 3 space cruisers carrying 20 people passed them and landed just ahead of them. Zubin looked, and it was the old bus driver he had knocked out. He looked carefully and saw 4 women, 8 men, a few children, and an old lady holding tightly to the bus driver. They were tied up while 4 men started beating and terrifying the men. 3 men jumped off the space cruisers as the driver cut off the engines while one of them approached the women. "I'm going to start with you, Granny," holding his grouch as he continued. "I know the old man hasn't satisfied you. Maybe you'll get one last orgasm before you die. Afterward, I work my way down to that baby boy over there. Then my men will follow as your husband and these children watch, and then I will kill y'all and leave you here to rot." Zubin and Efusa didn't hesitate and arose from their hiding. "Let's see how you are supposed to do that when you are dead." The old man raised his head. "That's him. That's the guy that took my bus." And Zubin said to the old man, "Sorry, my friend, but I needed to do that. But I promise you one thing, you will not die today." The rest of the warriors walked out with their weapons drawn and ready to fight. The 4 men stopped beating the men, and the brutes turned toward Efusa and the warriors, as the leader said, "Who the fuck are you, and what business is it of yours on what I do?" Zubin said, "If only I had time, I would teach you how to respect women and children, but that'll be a quick lesson before you die. I would love for your death to be done by a woman." Yong didn't hesitate and said, "My pleasure." Yong rushed toward the man, and as the man lunged out to punch her, she quickly cut off his arm as she made a backflip. She quickly decapitated the man. Before the rest of the men could react, the rest of the warriors threw stars, killing them instantly as Zubin and Efusa untied the men and put them in the space cruisers while Yong and Dahlia untied the women and children and they all headed toward the campsite. Chapter 24. Oedipus and the Pits of Hell. The warriors had all agreed that their new friends that they had just rescued had to travel with them, as they headed toward camp to meet Axel. Not expecting the 3 space cruisers, Axel hid herself, until she identified Zubin and Efusa. Axel shouted, "What are you guys doing back so soon?" Zubin shook his head. "Too much to explain right now, but we must get in touch with Aldhib, because a ship is to arrive tonight at, or around midnight, and we are not sure what he wants us to do." Axel said, "There's no way to tell where he is, but I would call this an emergency." She pressed the emergency button on her wrist. Simultaneously, everyone's communication devices vibrated, allowing everyone to see everyone else's location on the device. Aldhib called within 2 seconds. "What is it?" Aldhib asked. Axel said, "We have information that they expected the ship to arrive tonight around midnight." Aldhib said quickly, "Good work, and I will contact you later. Stay safe until you hear back from me." Aldhib quickly called Wanyanyekavu. "There is a ship that will be here in about 4 hours. Wanyanyekavu said, "Stay put, we will be there in 3. And disconnected. Aldhib said to himself out loud, 3? How in the fuck you going to do that? Wanyanyekovu yelled the battle cry to the top of his lungs and left Obe, Elijah, and Elisha and their men behind while the rest got on the jet ships and headed to Cuauhtémoc. Meanwhile, Axel and the rest at Vista Hermosa rested, for Axel had already prepared a meal for them in advance. They waited for Wanyanyekovu and his battalion since Aldhib and his crew were already hidden inside the main complex at Colonia Anahuac, awaiting Wanyanyekovu's arrival. 37 jet ships raced to Vista Hermosa, arriving just shy of 10:45 p.m. Wanyanyekovu radioed in just before he arrived there to check everyone's location and the situation at Vista Hermosa. Leaving the space cruisers there at Vista Hermosa, Axel was upset because the only thing she did all day was cook. Wanyanyekovu smiled and said as he opened his hand to her, "Here, ride with me." He radioed into Aldhib for his location. But Aldhib advised everyone to go black, because the ship was approaching quickly. Wanyanyekovu and the remaining jet ship stood there hovering over the lake's shoreline, awaiting Aldhib's call. When the ship arrived, it appeared out of nowhere, with no trail or lights to detect. It just appeared, then the sequence began. A light first shines on the tower and blinks 4 times. While the ship rotated at 180 degrees, then back to 0, then 360 degrees, it happened twice before 2 large doors slowly opened in the lake. The water splashed wildly as the ship approached the shore. Once the doors were open, there appeared to be a force field that prevented the water from going inside the opening. Then the spaceship made loud noises, and the force field created a pyramid-like shape, and steam appeared. Wanyanyekovu and the rest of his warriors began their race to the location in a V formation, and the V formation quickly became a U formation. At this time, the spaceship began its 360-degree counterclockwise rotation, and a beam of light shone into the opening. Aldhib radioed Wanyanyekovu. "According to Jamie, it's about to release the people inside." Just as he spoke, you could see the people covered in a clear gel lowered down in the beam of light. Wanyanyekovu arrived right when the third person was being lowered into the opening. By this time, they were in their O formation and surrounded the ship. Wanyanyekovu ordered all speedsters to go up in the ship by the beam. Grace, Axel, and 2 more speedsters ran up the beam of light. Right when Axel entered the ship, guards noticed the intruders and the gun turrets on the building started firing upon Wanyanyekovu. Aldhib and Joy quickly destroyed the turrets as Joy created an electrical blast. Then 10 jet ships broke formation and quickly returned fire to the rest of the men as Aldhib, Joy, and Amardad forced their way into the tower. The people from the different towns and villages started running frantically away from the scene as more men showed up. Another group broke off the formation as Wanyanyekovu himself moved toward the opening. Seeing the bodies being lowered, he radioed the speedster to find the ship's pilot so they could land the ship, but they couldn't find the ship's pilot. "Grace! Found the pilot and force him to land that ship!" shouted Aldhib, then looked at Joy. "Damn, I got distracted. Thanks, baby. You just saved my life." The bodies stopped descending from the ship. It rotated accordingly and landed near the lake, forcing the men out of the ship as the large door opened up. Wanyanyekovu stood there atop one of the doors as the rest of his warriors landed their jet ships nearby. Jome and about 20 men approached Wanyanyekovu. Scratching his head, he said, "All Abenian technology and weaponry, but not one Abenian is here." Daniel entered the spaceship and peeled the gel off one of the individuals inside. Daniel hit the man on his back, and the person started to breathe. He was fragile, and his breathing was faint. Daniel yelled out to Wanyanyekovu, "Wanyanyekovu! They are alive, but I need help peeling this gel off." The people from the towns and villages stood by watching, and Wanyanyekovu said to one man, "You." The guy pointed to himself. "Yes, what is your name?" The man said, Sanchez, I need you to gather some men." Wanyanyekovu paused and yelled back at Daniel, "How many people are in there?" Daniel said, "Over 1,000. Turning back to the man, Wanyanyekovu said, "Get all these people and go help the man inside." And the man did just as Wanyanyekovu ordered. The people were confused about what was happening, thinking that they had just been saved, in the back of their minds, but they asked themselves, was this man just as evil as the last tyrant? One in Yekova radioed. I need to transport over 1,000 people back to Madin at Altenware. The bus driver that Zubin saved told Zubin. The buses we use every morning can carry plenty of them to your camp, and there are more at the depot, as well as Skycraft. We will be more than happy to drive them there. Zubin radioed to Wanyan Yekovu. Give us a few minutes, we will have more than we need. The old man and his wife, along with the people on the cruisers, guided Zubin and the rest of the warriors to the bus depot. On their way there, the old man, teary-eyed, asked, Why would you save us from our oppressors, Oedipus and Abeni B6? Who are we to receive such a reward, or what are they searching for? Zubin smiled. It is our leader, a very proud and spiritual leader, who has led us to salvation, to enlightenment, and Sabaoth. It is he who questions what is going on here, with his people. The old man said, His people? Is he Wakatilian? Zubin, pointing at Wanyan Yekovu. That's him there, isn't it obvious? The old man said. Okay, yes, but he mustn't journey down to the abyss, at least not now. If you honor this man, don't let him go down there, at least not tonight. Zubin radioed Aldhib. I was just advised that it would not be wise to let Wanyan Yekovu go down in that hole that they are calling the abyss, at least not tonight, Aldhib said. Why is that? Zubin said. I was only advised that it would not be wise for him to go down there, at least not tonight, Aldhib said. I'll see what I can do. Aldhib is unsure what to do as he tells Joy and Jom, with a few other warriors, what was said to him, and they approach Wanyan Yekovu. Please, we do not know what is down there, but we've advised not to allow you to go down until morning, Wanyan Yekovu said. Whatever is down there, I can handle it, and it'll be all right. Jom looked at Wanyan Yekovu. I feel you should wait until morning. Wanyan Yekovu smiled. Okay, I'll wait, my friend. That night, they pulled 2,695 people from the spaceship. Upon listening to the advice of his friends, everyone but Wanyan Yekovu went down into the abyss, and pushed out an additional 665 people that were alive. All night long, as rumors spread throughout the land, the entire territory was shut down as the people rushed to reach the location of the abyss. By 6 a.m., the buses started arriving, moving all the people from the ship and the abyss back to Madin at Altenware. The locals volunteered and began taking people to Madin at Altenware, and the rest began taking some of the locals back home. The last bus left about 1 p.m. Wanyan Yekovu camped out at the opening with 15 of his warriors. Wanyan Yekovu watched the last bus leave, and many of the locals had gone home. Tried and weary, he decided to wait one more day to venture into the abyss. His warriors were sitting by a campfire while the women prepared food, given to them by the locals. Jom walked towards Wanyan Yekovu. About 20 more minutes and you can eat. You have to be tired, Wanyan Yekovu said. Yes, I am. Scratching his head and yawning, Wanyan Yekovu repeated himself. Yes, I am. Closing his eyes for a second, Wanyan Yekovu said, I'm too tired to even think about the abyss and its content, but as soon as I get up, we all shall see what it is that they didn't want me to see. Jom said, I am curious as well. Enjoying a great meal and a few minutes of discussing what had happened that day, Wanyan Yekovu finally went to sleep that evening at 4 p.m. Wanyan Yekovu finally woke up at 6 a.m. Everyone approached the abyss. He left 2 men up top while he and the others headed down the abyss using the jet ships. They descended slowly down the deep room with their lights on about 200 feet as they all looked around. This is an enormous place, echoed Jom's voice. Wanyan Yekovu shook his head. Yeah, pretty much what Kenji said. A few warriors landed. Someone finds the lights, or something in here. Jom ordered his warriors. Would you like for me to turn the lights on? Everyone was up in arms until they saw a large, computerized female face appear in front of them. My name is Isabella. I didn't mean to startle you. Would you like for me to turn on the lights? Wanyan Yekovu said. Hi, my name is Wanyan Yekovu. What is this place? Abella said. This is a research and development center where we study and document ways to eradicate the Wakatilians' DNA, code name New Willie Lynch. This floor researches and tests synthetic drugs and compares different DNA strains. Abella turned on the lights behind her. This is where we collect Wakatilians. Using their 9 DNA series, we can pinpoint and find the most mutated cells in their body. The Wakatilians are dropped here in a protective shell, and we draw blood from each individual. A conveyor belt started to run as Abella continued. They are then judged by age, weight, height, geographical location, and sex, and taken to the second floor for manipulation and sexual exploration. At the end of the conveyor belt was a small hole, and they all heard a door unlock itself and open right next to the conveyor belt. The lights on the second floor turned on as everyone got off their jet ships, walked toward the door, and began walking down the stairs. Abella continued. This is the manipulation department, codenamed Divide and Conquer. Here we devise ways to allow Wakatilians to destroy each other by using psychological means to create self-hatred. Teaching them to disrespect their women, molest children, rape, drug use and abuse, alcoholism, and then we replace some of them into their respected communities. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, blue lights turned on, one by one. These blue lights were on top of tubular glass of different sizes encased with people in them, covered in a transparent gel. Embryos, as well as some Wakatilians of different ages, appeared in them. Abella continued, as Wanyanyekovu's heart seemed to sink into his chest and his eyes watered up. Synthetic drugs are used to control them and in a lucrative pornographic broadcast located downstairs. Walking past the last row of enclosed tubes, Wanyanyekova looked into the eyes of an elderly man suspended in the casing and put his head down, feeling as if he had failed him. Tears were now rolling down his eyes. A bright light was turned on, covering the entire floor, revealing thousands of bodies. Wanyanyekovu fell to his knees in disbelief and yelled in a horrible cry unheard of before. He ran up to see 10 dead Wakatilians, primarily naked and chained to tables. Some had needles in their arms or a white powdery substance stuck to their noses. Abella continued. Wanyanyekovu ran from table to each body, checking for a pulse, but no pulse was found. Wanyanyekovu looked up at Joan. Stay here and find out more. I'll be back. The rest of the warriors followed him. Wanyanyekovu turned around and yelled with so much anger. Stay fucking here! Wanyanyekovu ran back up the steps, jumped on his jet cruiser, and drove to shore. He fell to the ground, yelling, cursing, and swinging his arms angrily, eventually crying himself to sleep. Wanyanyekovu found himself covered up and woke up to a baby crying, and his warriors by his side. Jom holding the baby. All the information was gathered, but there was one level that was tightly sealed. Even Abella was unauthorized to open it. Wanyanyekovu stood up. I wanted to apologize for my words and actions. It was unlike me, and I repent to you for it. Please forgive me. Wanyanyekovu looked around him, and thousands of people surrounded him. What is this, and whose baby are you holding? Jom said. The people are here to thank you for destroying their oppressor, and the baby was found in a cage. Wanyanyekovu looked at the baby and saw it was from the same tribe and clan as Obe. He turned to talk to the people, but they couldn't hear him. Jom handed him a bullhorn. My friends, my name is Wanyanyekovu. We have much to talk about, but I must bury my people. The crowd yelled. We will bury them, for you. In tears once again he said, Thank you, for it would have been challenging for me to do it. Wanyanyekovu handed Jom the bullhorn and said, Dekarish. Jom looked at him strangely, and Wanyanyekovu smiled. The baby's name will be Dekarish. The crowd divided themselves into groups and began to bury the Wakatilian people that were in the abyss. While Wanyanyekovu separated himself from everyone, taking his jet ship on top of a tall mountain, and wrote, Why? In the beginning, we were people of different beliefs. We spoke several different languages. Yes, we were great in our own way. The largest continent in the world. Even today. Some even refer to her as a girl, a woman, the mother. Africa. Riches include gold, diamonds, and pearls. The beginning of civilization was started in her. Yet, having so many accomplishments, got credit for none. Creating pyramids, that are scientific wonders of today. Numerous things, that are even used today. Wakatilians today, Negroes, but Africans back then. Let's just call it yesterday. Still unique, different, very simple people. Still not given credit that they are due. Why? Even back then, there are so many people that I could name. From the past to the present, but I won't, for we all know their names. My problem is, why? Why should any human being have to defend themselves? For being a certain race, creed, or color? The past is truly the past. That we learned from. Ignorance played a major part in the Europeans' hearts, which thought they were superior back then. There are even some of those that think that way today. We were murdered, but it was as if killing a fly. We were beaten, much like I've seen some people train a dog. Women were raped, children molested, men tested. Just considered simply as stock. Why? Now, since that time, we celebrated your holidays, fighting your wars. This thing called the 4th of July? But who really won their independence? Give me liberty or give me death. Someone once said, but whom did he refer to? They got their liberty. We were sentenced to death. All men are created equal, except for those of us who were considered savages in those days. Simply because we couldn't read or write in their language. They couldn't understand ours. Did we call them savages? All this for the sake of liberty, they say. But none of it was for us. We fought more wars, but died in vain. Why? Our fathers, our mothers, our children, our ancestors were murdered. Why? I write not to instill hatred for anyone. Just love. The time is now to awaken. Many years we have been miseducated. But we can read and write, now, and learn about the truth. If no one else teaches you the truth, you have you. If I asked you, do you know who you are? If the answer is no, my reply. Why? Red lights flashed on the communicator vibrating on Wanyanyekovu's hip. It was Obey who was calling on the emergency channel. Wanyanyekovu? Wanyanyekovu! Wanyanyekovu quickly answered the communicator. Yes, Obey, what is it? Wanyanyekovu replied. Looks like Oedipus has gotten your message. Look at your GPS. It's covered in a gigantic mass. I can't even count how many there are. He's headed straight to you. Wanyanyekovu shouted the battle cry and ordered all civilians out of the region until further notice. Pressing the emergency button on the communicator as the warriors prepared themselves, Wanyanyekovu called Obey on his device. When they get here, make sure you are behind them, and kill them as quietly as you can until you are noticed. Then take no mercy, those that survive, we will take mercy on whom Sabaoth tells us to. The fearless warriors were ready, and even some civilians joined in to do all they could to help. Yael appears to Wanyanyekovu. Prepare your men for the abyss, for now you fight only flesh, but down there you shall fight only spirits. Fight with honor and not anger, for this battle is not yours but Sabaoth. And then he disappeared. Only miles away, Wanyanyekovu gathers all the warriors, opens his communicator, and says the survivor's prayer. All who come, that are not evil, and those that survive. I will test their hearts, and let Sabaoth decide. Amen. Turning to the civilians. Shoot to kill, however, if they survive, it's because their hearts might be pure, not evil. However, trust none of them until I see them first. Sabaoth will make way for his people to live. Obey was miles behind Oedipus, and Oedipus was unaware of their presence. Obey and Wanyanyekovu send out all speedsters to minimize Oedipus' army by 10% before Oedipus reached Wanyanyekovu. The speedsters were called back to rest once the fighting began. Oedipus was surrounded, and his men didn't have a chance. With Obey, Elijah, Daniel, Grace and their men in the rear and Wanyanyekovu and the rest were in the front, they devastated Oedipus and his men. The speedsters were called back in to finish the battle. They brought the rest of the men back to Wanyenyekevu as he touched them and decided their fate. They chose 40 men to live, and the rest died on the spot. There stood Oedipus with a broken leg and gunshot to the shoulder. "We finally meet, Oedipus," said Wanyenyekevu. "Who are you?" Oedipus replied. "I am the child of the Most High, who was sent to rescue his people from people like you. This battle was meant to be from the first time I met your youngest son to the oldest, and it was me and my men who had the honor of killing all of them. I see what you have been doing to my people, and the pain is great, but I will not be the one who kills you. Sabaoth's children shall have that honor." Oedipus replies, "Fuck you, and your damn people," and spits on the ground in front of Wanyenyekevu. "Interrogate him for all and any information needed, and let the people have him," Wanyenyekevu said to Jom, as he turned and walked away. After days of interrogating, the men, women, and children all attacked and killed Oedipus. Wanyenyekevu met Obe, and discussed what to do with the dead. Later that night, Wanyenyekevu was sitting down as Obe stood up. "Obe, have you discovered your gift yet?" Obe said. "No, but I've been fasting and training. When it comes, I guess it will come." Wanyenyekevu took out his Colt 45 and shot Obe. Obe yelled, "What'd you do that for?" Wanyenyekevu said, "A few times I've seen you hit and stabbed and you didn't even know it, and Sabaoth never showed me in any vision of harm coming to you. Plus, look at you. You've been standing in a pile of burning red-hot coals for at least 10 minutes, and you didn't say a word, and by the way, when I shot you, you didn't feel a thing, you just reacted to me shooting you." He grabbed the bullet from off the ground and gave it to him. "And one more thing." Tapping on his earpiece, "Jom bring de Karish." Grace approached them with the baby. "Here is your kinsman. May he grows up to be your greatest gift, a son." Obe was excited and happy and started crying, as Wanyenyekevu walked away and started praising Sabaoth. Later that day, Wanyenyekevu called everyone together. "It is now time to enter the abyss." Many stayed on top and watched as Wanyenyekevu and 50 of his men descended to the first level, leaving 10 of his men. Then the second level, where he left 10 more, and on to the third level. Wanyenyekevu, looking around, noticed the place had been clean, and there was no evidence that anything had ever been down there. On the third level, they came to what appeared to be a door made of boulders with a sign of an unknown language. "Hades," Amardad interpreted. "The language." Wanyenyekevu got on the communicator to the men on each level above them. "Gather up anything we missed and start setting charges to blow this damn place to kingdom come." As they all began looking for levers and switches to see if they could find a way to open the door, Obe started hitting the door with his hands. Still nothing. Wanyenyekevu orders everyone to stop. "I have an idea." He took the sand from around his neck and grabbed his canteen. He put 1 drop of the content into the canteen and ordered everyone to wipe their weapons with it, and then wipe their exposed skin with it. Obe wiped his hands, arms, and neck with the content from the canteen and just touched the door, which turned into a puff of smoke. "Well, that was easy," said Obe. A narrow stairway appeared. They all headed down, but Wanyenyekevu stopped the men. "Only my strongest warriors in Sabaoth will be able to come, for I fear that what is down here is truly demonic." His strongest, fearless, and ready warriors stood there: Obe, Grace, Mercy, Joy, Jom, Elijah, Elisha, Daniel, and Aldib, with Wanyenyekevu taking the lead. The stairway was 5 feet wide and was spiraling downward. Strange noises were surrounding them, and every few feet hung torches mounted to the cave's walls. A liquefied substance was oozing down the walls, and the smell was unbearable. As they reached the bottom of the stairway, there was an enormous pit 200 yards wide and a forever circle of darkness, followed by a level of boiling red fiery pit of lava. This pattern repeatedly continued, going deeper and deeper downward. Looking up, they saw the same pattern repeating itself upward. As they walked through the darkness, they could hear a sizzling sound, followed by screams. Reaching for their flashlights, they saw little hands. Some were claws touching them and turning into puffs of smoke as the warriors were being handled. one Inyekova said. They cannot even touch the blood of Mshika in the sand. Pointing their flashlights in different areas, they could see the faces of some of the hideous creatures, peeking out and looking at them. The sounds of movement surrounded them, and they were silent as they headed down, looking and observing when Aldhib said, I see why people say, go to hell. Joam said. Only you would say such a thing, in a time like this. Shrugging his shoulders, Aldhib said, No, I'm being for real. This place is horrible. One Inyekova interrupted. Focus! This is a place one must truly stay focused and remain in the spirit. They walked to the end of the cavern, where they found a mound of rocks at the edge. There was an opening that looked like a large well. There stood a face with only its eyes peeking out at them. What the fuck are you doing in here again, one Inyekova? One Inyekova said. Again? Then he thought about his dream he had years ago. The creature interrupted. Fuck that, get out! As he raised from the hole, it stood 10 feet tall, and it was hideous. Horns grew out of its head, and bear-like claws grew out of its hand. It shouted something, and thousands of minions of all sizes quickly surrounded them. One Inyekova and his warriors quickly formed a circle with their backs turned against each other. Who are you? And how do you know my name? The beast said. I am Aestia, the commander and ruler of Sloth. I am well aware of your foolishness, and today it will stop. The beast shouted to the minions, and they attacked. One Inyekova and his warriors attacked the minions. They turned into puffs of dust as the warriors fought back using their weapons and gifts. One Inyekova gave command every 10 minutes before he ordered Alicia to form a dome when it was time. He counted down. 5, 4, 3. Now! And everyone got in it. All the creatures leaped at them but landed on top of Elisha's dome as one Inyekova poured a drop from the canteen onto Elisha's hands, and all the creatures that came in contact with the dome turned into dust. The entire dome was covered in soot, and it blinded them within the dome. One Inyekova said, Lower the dome, but stay alert. As he lowered the dome, they were all covered with soot. They ran to the stairway, but Aestia stood in front of them. One Inyekova stood in front and ordered everyone to wipe off their weapons and reapply the liquid from the canteen to their weapons and themselves while he stalls the demon. Are you afraid that I will destroy you? One Inyekova said. Aestia raised in anger. You silly man, your flesh, I can jump into your body and make you kill yourself. One Inyekova jokingly. Nah, you wouldn't do that. You're too lazy. Remember old commander and ruler of laziness. You take honor in something so ridiculous. Daniel handed one Inyekova the canteen as he looked up at the creature. Let me clean this off for your destruction, if you don't mind, and let's have at it. Aestia replied. You're puny little. Weapons can't warm me. One Inyekova shouted. Impy. And within seconds shouted. Iwa. They all used their gifts and powers against Aestia as it yelled out in pain before them all. With one force and in one moment, they destroyed Aestia into a pile of dust. The dust blew away slowly, and an earthquake shook the foundation. One Inyekova shouted. Quickly! Up the stairs, this place is his domain and is finna turn into dust itself. Boulders started falling into the lava below as they ran up the stairway. Aldhib and one Inyekova were the last ones to come out. Everyone out and get ready to blow this place up! Shouted one Inyekova over his earpiece. Clearing everyone out on each level and setting the charges for 5 minutes for each level, they heard the explosions as they all made it out of the abyss. They all ran to their jet ships and drove as fast as they could before hearing the last one, and the entire earth imploded, creating a crater the size of the abyss. Circling back around, they looked down to see the bottom of the crater. Fill Oedipus and his dead in that hole and cover it up, said one Inyekova. Returning to the city, one Inyekova ordered everyone to get cleaned up and rest. The next morning, one Inyekova and his men, using their gifts, also took part in helping the people rebuild their town. Speedsters helped gather the rest of Oedipus' dead and dump their bodies into the abyss. The people called the place till this day El Malsirement Perecera, which means, the evil shall surely perish. Astonished at what they saw, many civilians joined Wanyanyekevu's army. Afterward, they buried Wanyanyekevu's people on the opposite side of town. It took 6 weeks to bury all the bodies from the abyss, and they were buried in a beautiful park created by the locals they named El Mar de Dolor, which means the Sea of Pain. There was a glorious celebration in honor of the people who died there, and the people performed the funeral in the Wakatilians tradition that Wanyanyekevu taught them. This celebration lasted for 25 days on May 1st and was called Watu Sasa Kapumzika, which translated, His people now rest, and is honored every year. 2 months after the abyss was seized, many of Wanyanyekevu's warriors departed to find their family members. Within 6 months, they started an exodus back to Madin at Altenware. Heading back, many of them heard of Wanyanyekevu's fame. They were also bringing back seeds, animals, and family members. 47 warriors had left, but over 2,000 came back. A trail of warriors living and protecting Sabaoth's land reached from Madin at Altenware to Colonia Anahuac. 687 miles were protected to the point whereby the people started feeling free again. Within their borders was Laguna de Bustillos, a vast lake that was perfect for fishing. An irrigation system was used to help farm most of this region. At the southwest banks of Laguna de Bustillos, there was the city of Colonia Anahuac. They used Colonia Anahuac much like a huge flea market, where the old bartering system was awakened and utilized once again. By reconstructing highways 5, 16, 21, and Del Ejido Freeway. Heading west of Colonia Anahuac, there stood Ciudad Cuauhtémoc surrounded by Highway 21, a centralized location or the region's heart. A beautiful landscape mixed with grassland and desert with various mountains overlooking the entire area. Going in any direction would be a breath of fresh air. 25 miles to the north on Highway 5 was a stretch of land that led to the twin cities of Colonia Alvaro Obregon and Grañas El Venado. Wanyanyekevu claimed all the land as Tierra de Dios or Sabaoth's land. It was just the complete opposite of the area where Wanyanyekevu was born and raised, but he finally grew to love the place. Unlike Louisiana, there was no humidity. Tornadoes were not a common factor. But the monsoon season brought back memories of home at times. The path from Madin at Altenware to this new area called home was called Wanyanyekevu's Trail. 80% of the people stayed and learned the ways of Wanyanyekevu and served Sabaoth. The rest were left alone and in peace but honored Wanyanyekevu as a great man. They moved in different directions but always stayed west of Wanyanyekevu Trail for safety reasons. During the cleanup and destruction of the abyss, all the drugs were destroyed and Wanyanyekevu and his warriors taught the people farming, gardening, medicine, and even the Abenian technology. The green lands were now used for farming, and the people felt peace for the first time in a long time. They used Madin at Altenware as a training base only, but the people living in this new area raised their families in peace and had a comfortable life. The Wakatilians that were captured from the ship and the abyss took some time to heal even with all the healers. But they eventually were healed from their diseases, addictions, and phobias but refused to return to their homes as a sense of embarrassment and violation. They, too, stayed in the region, learning and teaching their ways of life to the people. It took these Wakatilians a while to adjust to living around the Kompyutans and Anakataas, who worshipped Sabaoth. Once it was proven, they, too, received gifts and powers from Sabaoth that were unimaginable. The population grew to 769,000 men, women, and children, all qualified to be called fierce warriors. These people became known as mestizos. The end.